Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Duque, and Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
Councilmember Duque advised me that she is under the weather tonight and not able to join us. So can we have a motion to excuse?
Move to excuse Councilmember Duque.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? The motion passes. Before we get to our audience communication, we may need to move item 6B to after 6C. Mr. Bierman from the county is running behind due to traffic, I understand. So we may need to adjust on the fly if that's okay. With that, we'll go to audience communication. Anyone in chambers tonight, please state your name and your city of residence, please.
Russell Dills, Mill Creek. I'm president of the Dumas Lane HOA. And this concerns a proposal PL 2022-0016 rezone of 13529 Both Leverett Highway from low density residential to community business. The Dumas Lane HOA board and Mr. Carlos, lot owner to the east of property, previously given testimony. And the board represented the input of 17 residents, including the neighbor to the north of the lot. And everyone would like a single family house put in, but given the reality of HB 1110, we felt that commercial business would have the least impact on the neighborhood. Now, the provisions of HB 1110 are applicable to the LDR zoning at that site. That's right by a bus stop. In fact, it's in the front off the porch. And it would allow up to 4 residences with no on-site parking. This has caused worse impacts than the original MDR proposal for that lot by Bedrosian. And we are already impacted in that neighborhood by the Jackson High School traffic and parking issues. And kind of feel that if there was no parking there, LDR development, that's the place they would park in our neighborhood too, which just add to the mess. After the last meeting, at council meeting, I did communicate with Mr. Carlos after the last hearing, and he stated, I quote, "We were not aware of HB 1110, but now knowing the existence of HB 1110, we of course agree with the board and would rather that the lot be rezoned to commercial business instead of MFR. At this time, there is no neighborhood opposition to the rezone of to commercial business of that lot. Thank you."
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in the audience like to address the council? Anyone online like to address the council before we move on? Going once, twice? Okay, there'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. That brings us to our presentations. We welcome Representative Berg. Stephanie, are you introducing? Martin, who's?
I didn't have anything to introduce, did Martin, but I can introduce.
Okay.
I can launch this off. So tonight we've invited Representative Berg to come in ahead of our legislative session that will be starting in January. We have worked together as a council to give her what our overall legislative agenda is. And I had wanted to make sure that she was able to come in and talk to us about what her priorities might be going into the legislative session, and that everyone on the council could also have a chance to speak to her and tell them their concerns as we go in that may or may not be the council's concerns, because I am aware that that each individual also may have things that they have questions about or concerns that may or may not be the overall council stand. So I'm really excited that we are able to have her come in tonight. We're very fortunate to have her live right here in our city. And we are very fortunate that she is the finance chair and she is amazing. So thank you very much for coming in tonight, Rep. Berg.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me and see the slides? Okay. Awesome. It's great to be here. Thank you, Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Vignal for that wonderful introduction. I always love, oh, sorry. Oh, how do I share the screen? Sorry. I know Adrian said that might be a thing. Let's see for online. There we go. Perfect. Okay, great.
Well, that's good.
Yes, so now it looks like everybody can see it online. Thank you so much. But thank you for having me. I love coming to speak to council every now and again. And also I think tonight will be a little bit of listening as well. So I brought my notebook. But I did want to let you know that we're about to enter into a short session. And what does that look like? Let's see here. Is this advancing? Let's see here. Is it okay? Maybe I don't know how to do this one. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. I was like, well, what do I push? Oh, thank you. And then which one? Okay, awesome. What is a short session? I will tell you, it's probably easier than PowerPoint on Zoom on a computer that's not a MacBook. So, but a short session is a 60-day session. It always starts the second Monday in January. We're there literally for 60 days straight. The clock starts ticking and it does not stop until we sine die on that last day, which will be right around the first week of March. What this means, it's a
One second.
Justin, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear now.
okay, perfect.
We can't see the slides still, but we can hear again.
Okay, and then can I just click this thing? I don't want to touch anything. And then
Yep, there you go. It's working. It's
There we
working.
go. Okay, so I'm gonna go this way, short session. Okay, so carryover
Don't go
bill.
very far, Joe.
I know, you never know. I'm just gonna touch the space bar, I promise. So we're carrying over bills. So let's say a bill that you really love, that you were really passionate about in that first session last year or this year, beginning of this year, didn't pass. It still has an opportunity to pass. So we are carrying over bills. Nothing is dead until we sine die at the end of 2024. The other thing is we do have capital budget projects and dollars available, not as much as in the big biennium, but it's what we call supplemental. And so I put on here, reach out to Mayor Holtzclaw or reach out to my assistant Catherine for the application. We're making sure the city of Mill Creek, the city of Snohomish, all the cities represented in the 44th have these applications and are able to apply for these supplemental funds. So let's talk about some highlights of what's coming up. Last time I was here, we talked about what I'd done. Now let's talk about what I'm hoping to do in this next session. And I will tell you the first bill that I will be dropping is called the Homeless Encampment on Private Property Bill. And it was inspired by you. I wish Chief White was here. It was something that me and him talked about over coffee about a need that the city had. I had my staff draft a bill. I believe it's a great bill. It's being reviewed right now by AWC and some other stakeholders, and it will be dropping, as I said, in this upcoming session. So again, it's a short session, so I always like to make sure expectations are realistic. We've only got 60 days to get things over the finish line. If for some reason, for example, this does not get over the finish line, I can't just carry it over to the next year. I'll have to reintroduce it. And guess what? I will, because it's an important bill for our city and it's an important bill to me. Another bill I'll be introducing is around renters relief. I'll also, again, be trying to get our property owners some tax relief with a homestead tax exemption. And then, of course, food security. And we know that's a big issue for communities everywhere, including Mill Creek. So one of the other roles I play in the legislature, in addition to being finance chair, I'm also the chair of what we call the Food Fighters Caucus. It's a mouthful because we want a mouthful for all folks in our state. We work on food issues, legislation in a way that will get things done. So everything from childhood nutrition, funding food banks, emergency supplemental nutrition, you name it. This last session we worked a lot with Food Lifeline, medically supported food. So any of those issues come kind of through our caucus so that we can make sure all of our members, both sides of the aisle, know that we've got some really important things for community relating to food. So we will be having more food focused issues coming out as well this next session. Capital gains update. I always like to talk about more money coming into the state because that means more money coming into communities like ours. This bill is a bill much like federal capital gains. It is a bill on basically gains. If you sell a stock, if you make over $250,000 on that sales transaction, that $251st is taxed now by the state. That is something that many states do. We do have exemptions for small businesses. We have exemptions for real estate. We have exemptions for really all working families, so that this is going for truly enormous gains. And I will tell you, we thought this might bring in about $500 million to the state, just as swag. It brought in over $889 million to the state in its first year. All of that money will be going through to K-12 education, early learning, as well as capital budget improvements for our schools. So when you think about cap gains, think about schools, schools, schools. And as the gentleman just said about Jackson High School, parking is a bear. That place is packed. This money will be going to schools like that, just as an example, for construction and remodeling. So it was a really hard bill to get passed, really necessary. And again, it puts us in alignment with many other states. And just to be clear, our tax burden in this state is much lower than most other states because we do not have an income tax. And this tax is not taxing work, it's not taxing income, it's taxing wealth, and it's taxing large wealth. And you can see we have a lot of it in our state. So, other thing I want to mention, I've got a new position, and it's at the national level. So the National Conference of State Legislators has named me co-chair of their Budget and Revenue Committee. That puts me on their executive board, and it has me dealing with a lot of national issues around budget and revenue. Things like funding for services, budget processes, tax and revenue systems, legislative priorities, unfunded mandates, because I will tell you, as a city, you probably look at the state and say, what's up with that unfunded mandate? As a state legislator, I look at the feds and I go, hey, what's up with that unfunded mandate? Bodies like this actually work on issues to talk about unfunded mandates. We also talk a lot about state and local fiscal relationships, and we promote, this is a big one, we promote ideas and exchanges of information. Just so you know, the National Council of State Legislators, much like AWC, is bipartisan. And it's bicameral. So you've got state senators, you've got representatives like myself, you've got folks from both parties. It's all of us working together. And you can see my amazing vice chair is from Rhode Island. So you could not get more geographically diverse on this committee. But I'm really happy to be doing that. One of the reasons I stuck this in here is because a lot of folks know I've been traveling across the country doing a lot of budget and tax policy work for different organizations. And this is one of the reasons. So thank you for your grace in letting me kind of share the joy of Mill Creek across the country. And really exciting, I've got a new district office so that when I am in town, you can find me really easily right next door. I'm over in City Hall North, and I'm in Suite 210, sharing it with the Chamber of Commerce. Could not have thought of a better place. And I just put a little thing in my newsletter up here. Some of you, I gave it to you on the dais there, but I do have a stack of them outside my door. And so that's kind of my teaser to say, hey, come up and visit. If I'm not around and if the doors are open, there's a way to leave me a note. There's also flyers there. And of course, my little trademark bookmarks that you can take home to the kiddos so that, to encourage them to read and also contact their state legislator. That said, as always, thank you, thank you, thank you, Mill Creek. And I am here to listen because I know that you have had some legislative conversations, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, April. Questions? Who wants to start? Yeah, I'm not.
I can take questions offline, maybe from the audience.
Okay, yeah,
to the dais, and I'm happy to stay after
that'd be great.
and answer questions.
That'd be great. We don't have. Can you someone minimize the screen so we can see Stephanie?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not touching anything. I know.
There we go. It's taken care of.
There.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Representative Berg. How are you?
Hey, nice to see you.
It's good for you to come here, and we certainly appreciate it. And you touched on a couple of things briefly. You talked about You're working on a homeless encampment bill. Can you maybe go into some detail of what that encompasses?
Yeah, so basically it was an issue that was brought to me by the city where you would have homeless encampments on private property, and cities are sometimes interpreting the laws to feel as though they can't help those residents, those property owners, without it being a gift of public funds. This clarifies and states that if it's for public health or safety reasons, that cities can intervene on private property without it being a gift of public funds.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for that question.
Stephanie, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't necessarily have any questions. I feel like we went over everything that the council approved as a whole on our agenda. We've highlighted that we want to maintain control over our zoning. We highlighted that we are, I'm going off my memory because I don't have it ahead of me. We've highlighted that we would like to see some movement on the police pursuit to make that more understandable. Just off the top of my head. So we went over everything that the council approved with Rep. Berg. I didn't know if anybody else had any more questions about anything that we hadn't discussed in the past.
People, you've talked about your priorities for the session. What do you see as being the big issues that you guys are going to have to tackle?
I think this session, so the biennium, we started with it being the season of housing, right? The session of housing, and it's still the session of housing. We still have a really huge problem with housing supply, housing demand, unhoused folks and communities, all the things housing. And so I know we passed some big landmark legislation last year around housing, but I think there's a little more work to do around getting stable funding for our housing trust fund. As last biennium or last year, we did about $400 million into our housing trust fund, and that goes into low income and affordable housing. It's not there's no dedicated revenue source for that. And so one of my goals this year is to come up with a dedicated revenue source to fund affordable housing. And so that way cities as well as community partners can have certainty as they go out and bond and build into the future. We know from the census that we need more housing at all levels. So market rate, middle housing, that workforce housing, as well as low income housing. But the question is, how do we have certainty around funding those priorities? So for me, it's going to be all about revenue for housing.
Councilmember Steckler?
Thank you, Representative Berg. Appreciate you coming in tonight. A lot. I mean that. Couple things, just in response to your presentation, which was very good. You've seen all of our requests that I'm sure our Mayor Pro Tem has shared with you. So a couple thoughts and comments I'll make from myself personally. As of today, we don't have anything specific, but just a slow drip on you of keep thinking in the future, our DRCC property over here, we're going to be making a big ask of you and everyone else we could think of here in the near future, probably next year. Keep that in mind and keep us in mind as, you know, we're going to be coming out and asking all of our support from every representative, council member and everyone that we can. So that'll be forthcoming. We also are embarking on some strategic planning and thoughts for Mill Creek. We've hired an outside consultant, and being as how you are both a citizen and also a representative who has exposure into that area as well. You don't have to give it to us tonight, but I would, I think we on the council, as well as the mayor and the city employees, we would love to have your thoughts on, you know, knowing what we're thinking about. What would you think is strategically opportunities for us in Mill Creek to be thinking about for our growth in the future? I know housing is number one. You just mentioned it. It is on us as well. We know that's a concern. That's an issue, but I'd love to know what a citizen who has that kind of exposure from a legislative standpoint would be thinking as well. So maybe that's something you could make aware to our mayor or to our city manager. I think that's something that we would like to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, and just as a short response to that, and thank you for that question. The DRCC is really a passion project, I think, for so many people, both on the council as well as in the community. I will say, first off, the city's doing everything right by talking to community members about what they want. So that's the first thing, because you got to ask folks what they want to see there, what they'll use. I will tell you as a mother, as a longtime Mill Creek resident, as a lover of our city and a lover of the growth that I've seen our city kind of take on. I think that, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that property. And I'm hoping it's something that can really be inclusive of the whole community. Something for the kids, something for adults, something for our sports enthusiasts, something for our really little kids. When I think about things like Boys Club and YMCA. So you've got great opportunity. The last thing I'll say about that, don't forget the proximity of that property to what will be the new Snohomish County Food and Farming Center. So your timing could not be more perfect, because that's going to be an amazing project with your commercial kitchen, your processing ability, but also a year-round tinted farmers market that will be walkable from the property that you're developing. So you'll have my support for whatever the community members want to do with that property, and then you as counselors decide to do. But please, please, please ask us for funds, because the state really does want to support, not just with our thoughts, but also with our dollars. It's something that I really want to advocate for.
Okay, if you insist, we'll
I know,
come
I'll
back and
insist.
ask. Okay. Last question, your new position, I'm kind of slow. I'm not quite sure what exactly that entails. Could you tell us a little bit more about it, and maybe specifically how that could affect us in what we could be asking of you, or opportunities for us?
Yeah, so the new position in terms of the at the national
level, yes.
legislature, for me, it's really about talking to other communities about how and what they do. And so I think the biggest thing for me being a representative of the 44th is when I get a question about and I'm just throwing this out there, let's say, the DRCC, how do we go about asking for state funds? And I've got my ideas. Well, now I'm going to go talk to my colleague in Minnesota who has some other ideas and says, I've got my cities about that size and they did this. And then maybe I'll talk to my colleague in California who's like, actually, this would be a way better way to go about bonding, something like that. So it's just that connection, that information sharing, and honestly, the preview of what's coming up at the federal level and what other states are doing at the local and state level. So it's a really great opportunity. I love going and attending conferences, and I was able to actually present at the Institute for State Policy Leadership on digital taxation. Everybody's eyes probably just rolled back when I said that, because it's like, wow, that sounds so interesting. For tax nerds like myself, it was like the Super Bowl. So I was super excited to be able to present on that panel about digital taxation, because our state did something in that area first. And a lot of other states now, 10, 12 years later, are trying to follow up, and they're getting information from us. So it's, it's again, that information sharing.
I now see the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question.
Councilmember Faddick?
Thanks for coming out, Representative, and congratulations on the national role. Now that you described more about what it's all about, I'm super excited about that. I think the we is always smarter than the me, and someone that can go out and benchmark what other communities are doing is going to, I think, help our community quite a bit. And what I wanted to say was, and we had talked about this when the legislative committee was here talking about what had happened at the state level last year and all the work the legislative committee had done with you and obviously other folks to bring an outsized share to Mill Creek. And I want to thank you personally. I think we all want to thank you personally for that outsized share.
Yeah, well, no, it's I think it's something, closed mouths don't get fed. And so I think the city's done a great job of saying, here are our needs, and state, can you help us, carry this heavy burden? And I'm always happy to ask. I never can make the, promises that things will be accepted, but, knock on wood, I don't think they've turned us down yet. So I think we just keep doing the good work we're doing in this city, as well as the other cities that I represent. Have also been successful in those processes. So,
well, thank you. Hopefully we demonstrated the need for some technology funding. So if you have saw that loud and clear, thank you.
Set up. It's like, what is? Yeah, no. It's. I think it's an amazing city, but as the city grows, you definitely want support. And as a state legislator, I'm here to make sure you get that support.
Councilmember Cavalieri?
Thank you, Mayor. Representative, I wanted to follow up a little bit on the mayor's comments, and I know the Mayor Pro Tem's comments, sorry. I know the council as a body presented you with kind of our wish list of things we'd like to see addressed in the next session. And I think we all know and have witnessed the uproar of House Bill 1110, pros and cons against it. And so I guess I would make this petition from this legislator that my hope is that the legislature did hear the message loud and clear, is that cities want the autonomy for the most part to decide for themselves, is that we don't want the overreach. We would like the ability to carry out the residents' vision and not maybe the state's vision. I think collectively, I think that's probably the biggest ask that I would say from the dais here tonight, is that you bring that back to Olympia and maybe pump the brakes a little bit on 1110. It's not something that people have a big appetite for at this point.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And always happy to take back diverse opinions on it. I think the biggest issue for us with any new bill, especially landmark legislation like House Bill 1110, is clear and concise and accurate communication with the public. And so for me, in this moment, it's really interacting with folks in our community about what the bill actually does and what it actually doesn't do. But yeah, I will keep fighting for folks and making sure that we have access to affordable homes. Thanks.
Other questions? Stephanie, not
Great.
seeing anything. April, thank you for joining us again. We look forward to working with you this
And
session.
Mayor Holtzclaw, can I give you something?
Sure.
So I brought this pen, and it's because I've had, I don't know, 9 bills signed by the governor so far. And I'm feeling like this is gonna be the next one, this Mill Creek bill. So can I give you a pen from the governor just in advance?
Sure.
Just because I feel like it's gonna happen. You'll get a different color one when it's signed, because of course it'll come down. But I just want you guys to know how much I'm fighting for you in Olympia, and this pen will remind you. So thank you all in the audience, online, and thank you, city council members.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think Mr. Bierman hasn't joined us, has he? Thank you.
No, he hasn't, I don't think. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no objection, we'll move on to item C, the comprehensive plan update with OTAK.
I think your presentation was right after your memo, so I think you were in the right one.
On the bottom, comp plan update.
That is the, oh, it's right after the memo. Okay, thank you. And let me make it a little bit smaller. Is that looking? Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. It's great to be with you tonight. I'm Mandi Roberts with OTAK. I'm a principal planner with our firm. I've been here before speaking with you about the comprehensive plan. And so tonight I'm going to give you an update on the comprehensive planning work that we've been doing on several fronts. We'll talk about a little bit of background information. In particular, some of the work that the county's been doing surrounding the city so that we're aware of that. We'll talk about growth allocations, just a reminder of what those are for Mill Creek and how the comprehensive plan will be addressing those. We'll go through an outline of the plan. We've got a vision survey online at this time. We'd like to encourage you to help us get the word out about that. So we'll address that. And then we've been doing some analysis of demographics and contextual characteristics of the city. And so I will cover that as well in the community profile. And then we'll end with a section on next steps. So let's move forward to talk a little bit about just some background information. Why are we doing comprehensive planning? I think we've covered this in the past. So just briefly, we are required by the Washington State Growth Management Act to update our comprehensive plan. Used to be every 8 years, now it's every 10 years. And so for the 2024 adoption, we are looking ahead to the next 20 years after that, which will be 2044. So we're looking ahead, thinking about what's going to be happening in Mill Creek between 2024 and 2044, and we're adopting a plan to be able to address that. It provides a framework for coordination with adjacent cities surrounding you, as well as with the county and the regional plans that, or the regional plan that's being put forward by Puget Sound Regional Council as well. Cities who plan under the Growth Management Act have access to various funding programs, federal and state funding for transportation and infrastructure improvements. And, you know, basically all of your neighbors are planning under the Growth Management Act. So it's a great opportunity for us to coordinate and be consistent as much as possible with the county, regional, other local planning process, but still provide a reflection of this community. What does Mill Creek want? What is our vision for the community? So when we're developing this planning process, we are coordinating with and aligning with the Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050. They have multi-county planning policies that we look at, and we look at how we can be consistent with those. We look at Snohomish County, countywide planning policies, which have been adopted, and which of those apply to Mill Creek. And then we develop our own goals and policies for several elements, which I'll show you in a minute. The comprehensive plan then becomes a foundation for other plans and functional plans that the city creates and adopts, such as a transportation master plan or surface water management plan. So the comprehensive plan is really a foundation for planning. And it also is a supportive foundation for your code and development regulations and projects that get implemented. So we just talked about this a moment ago, but there has been a lot of legislation recently, and we are taking the opportunity to make sure that the city is aligning with the recent legislation in the way that we need to, as we're required to. So I won't go through all of the details here, but for example, House Bill 1220 was enacted a couple of years ago, and that basically requires jurisdictions to provide housing at various affordability levels. We call them income bands in your community to match what the affordability needs are in the community. We'll be coming back in a future presentation to take a deeper dive into that, to share what those income band allocations are and what our thoughts are about how we can meet those in the community. Also, House Bill 1110, let me just mention, it is in effect now. So we are thinking about it. We're considering what it means in terms of how it might partially help us in meeting growth allocations or not. Some of the issues that we see are just the market, for example, just doesn't really support the idea of people wanting to develop duplexes and triplexes and things on their single family lots. There's just not, there's really not a financial incentive for a lot of the residents here. So our economic consultant, Leland Consulting Group, will be coming back with us in a future briefing to kind of update you on that and what our thoughts are about what we might see over the next 20 years with House Bill 1110 implementation. And then also 1337, which looks at accessory dwelling units. We actually see there's more potential for that happening over the next 20 years throughout the community. And so we're kind of factoring that into our work at a greater level than some of the duplex and middle housing options. So I do want to, as part of the background, just talk a little bit about what's known as the MUGA, which is the Municipal Urban Growth Area. Snohomish County has multiple MUGAs. Mill Creek's is shown in this map, and it's represented by this dashed line that you see here, and you can see it basically extends over to I-5 to the west and a little bit east of the city here and a little bit south towards Bothell. And you can see what we've tried to do is outline some of your sub areas in the city. So we have the East Gateway, Urban Village, Town Center here in green, and the Mill Creek Boulevard sub area as well that has been studied in the past. So kind of keep an eye on this boundary of the city limits to help align with these upcoming maps, because I'm going to explain what the county is planning for the MUGA. It's county jurisdiction. Yeah.
Yeah, because the MUGA is not to be confused with just expansion and growth. It's internal growth, isn't it?
The MUGA is under the jurisdiction of Snohomish County, but it is aligned with Mill Creek. It's Mill Creek's municipal urban growth area. And basically that alignment just says that Mill Creek should be aware of what's happening around and what the county's plans are around your community. If the city were to, and this might be something that you're looking into as part of your strategic planning, but if you were to consider annexation in the future, the MUGA would be the place where you would do that, a portion or all of the MUGA.
Well, but the little dots around it, we're all thinking annexation, but you're calling out internal areas like town center and.
Oh yeah, let me get back to that to make
that's
it
where I
more
get a little
clear.
confused.
I'm sorry if that was confusing. Yeah, the MUGA is not the city limits. So your city limits line is the dark black boundary. That is completely under the city of Mill Creek's jurisdiction. That is what we're actively planning for in the comprehensive plan. The MUGA is the area outside of your city limits, which is encompassed within this light dashed line that you see here.
Right.
The MUGA will be addressed through our annexation policies in the comp plan that will guide decisions in the future if we decide to look at annexing any portions of the municipal urban growth area.
Right.
And what this map doesn't show is that's not entirely all ours. There's a portion of it on the west that's also claimed by Linwood. There's a bit of overlap and a bit of history between our two cities over a portion of that. And there are some portions, I don't think we have any overlap with Bothell down in the south, but there are a few areas in the southwest UGA that are unclaimed and no cities want them.
Yes, thank you.
So are we going to be talking about annexation in this presentation or not?
Not in this presentation, no. I think it is something that you may be talking about in the future as part of strategic planning. And the comp plan, as the mayor suggests, will discuss the annexation process, but that's really a separate process from the comprehensive plan and what we'll be doing. So,
okay.
And just one point of clarification, you had mentioned that we should be aware of the county's plans for the.
Your mic is off.
We should be aware of the, sorry, I pulled the Steckler. We should be aware of what's going on from the county's perspective, but we don't have any influence unless we have influence with the county. We don't have any influence on what happens if they decide they want to put up 6-story buildings, et cetera. We don't have any control over that.
Well, only to the extent that, you know, that there is a government and public process associated with their zoning, and, you know, they hopefully would come to you and gather your input, and then they would gather input from the public. So, yeah, I mean, maybe that's a little bit idealistic, but yeah, there is some input there, but it is adopted by the county commission as far as what the zoning is. And I'll explain kind of what their plans are in a moment, just so you can be aware of that. Yeah, you bet. Okay, so for the Snohomish County Comprehensive Plan, there was an environmental impact statement, EIS, created where they looked at various options. And the county is proposing to concentrate growth in the southwest MUGA, which includes Mill Creek's MUGA. And one of the reasons for that is because of the high capacity transit stations, including light rail, that are proposed in these areas. So light rail will be extending north to Everett as part of the future plans. And so when you see these circles here, these kind of represent high capacity transit stations, light rail transit stations. and a quarter mile, no, excuse me, a half mile walking radius to the center of those circles. So the plans for zoning or land use and zoning in the Southwest Muga include more intensive mixed use and housing options around the transit stations. And that kind of aligns with regional policy about maximizing the number of people living and working in proximity to high capacity transit. Because the more people that are using high capacity transit, the less they are driving and creating, related congestion. Also, housing in the county will include a wider variety of typologies in single family neighborhoods, so more medium density. And this does align with some of the recent legislation, including 1110, where we're looking at how can we diversify housing options and choices in some of the single family neighborhoods, not all of them, but those that are, in these transit corridors or in proximity to light rail stations. And also the county is of course considering new transportation and parks projects and other improvements to serve growth in these areas. Now I'm going to show you a really colorful map. This is just showing, in those 3 transit stations, the orange dashed areas around light rail are those designated as a light rail community designation. And again, that represents really kind of more intensive housing and mixed use in those areas around light rail stations. The green dashed areas that kind of lead into those orange areas, you see them along Highway 99 corridor and then along 164th on either side of the light rail station. Those are meant to represent mixed use corridors, and those are also served by bus rapid transit, which is another form of high capacity transit. So those would, the intent would be to have more concentrated density along those corridors as well. And then the gold area, which abuts Mill Creek's city limits line, this gold area here and in some other locations, that is representing the medium density residential, which again is like not apartments per se, but that level of density in between a single family house and an apartment. So townhouses, different multiplexes, maybe low level garden apartments or courtyard apartments, things like that.
So,
yeah.
Pardon me. If what you're telling us, this is Snohomish County's plan, proposed plan, right?
Yes.
So if we wanted to explore any type of annexation to the west, we would probably get a pushback from them because we'd be annexing right into their proposed growth area.
I don't
They want us
know.
to
I don't know if you'd get a pushback or not,
Well,
but
this is development, which they're talking about is development.
Well, they're talking about zoning
Zoning or
to
development?
accommodate future development. Yeah.
Yeah.
To create opportunities for future development. So it's just important because if you do want to consider annexation, which there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, right? There's a lot of infrastructure to take care of and a lot of things that
there's residential, but there's also business opportunity.
There certainly are. And I'm so glad you reminded me of that because one of the areas that is potentially, opportunity is Walmart, right near the freeway here, south of 164th. And there is the Crane Aerospace and Electronics facility there, which is expanding just to the south of Walmart, which is, really envisioned to be an employment base. Could be, a good opportunity just in terms of having capacity for jobs and, tax revenue potential in the future for the city. So something to think about.
Those are the positives, but there's also the residential challenges too.
Exactly. And it's close to the light rail station though. So it's great for people who might be working at the aerospace facility because they can, get there through light rail, but they can live, in another station area or something like that in the alignment.
This is also the orange line, right? That takes us
Yes,
straight up to this hub.
that's right. It connects with
Which
the light
connects down
rail.
into Mill Creek, yeah.
Yeah,
John, South Snohomish County is unique. Other counties don't have these large unincorporated urban growth areas
Right.
like the county does. So technically, I mean, legally under the GMA, urban services are supposed to be provided by cities, not the county. So the county would love for the cities to annex these unincorporated urban growth areas and take on the responsibility for providing fire and
So the county doesn't have the same urban growth responsibilities that the cities have?
well, they have to do planning for the unincorporated portions of the urban growth area. So they set the zoning until one of the cities annexes their portion of the MUGA, they have to do the planning under the Growth Management Act for it.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. Do they have the same type of urban growth guidelines and expectations that we have? They do, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And so that's a really good segue into the growth allocations. I do want to mention that the city, within your city limits, you have growth allocations that are targeted for the city. There are also separate growth allocations for jobs and housing units that are set for the MUGA. So it's not like there aren't any targets out there. There are much greater targets actually than what you have been allocated that need to be met through growth out there. So as the county is planning for growth in that MUGA and other areas of unincorporated county, they're trying to meet those targets, that they have too. So that's part of what's going into thinking about higher density use around light rail stations and in transit corridors and that kind of thing.
And all of our objectives are gonna change if we look at annexation, that would change the expectations, right? I would assume.
Well, of course, like your systems planning would change, you'd be taking on more surface water management responsibilities, utilities.
No, I mean the population objectives.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
excuse me, that's what you meant, like growth
Yeah,
allocation.
those are all gonna change.
Well, those would, with future annexation for
Yeah.
this particular plan update that we're doing in 2024, these won't change. Yeah, they'll be
yeah.
what they are. But if you did annex in the future, then you would get new allocations at such time as when you're ready to update. Yeah. Do you have a question there?
How is that, so if we annexed, obviously we'd get the population in that annexation area. How do they divvy up the projected population? Do they do it on some sort of pro rata basis throughout the county? How would they figure out what the population projection is for the annexation area?
They do have a formula, and it also factors in, remember the buildable lands analysis that the county does. So it's not just a prorated by land area. They kind of look at where the buildable lands opportunities are and different land uses in the area that's being considered and set targets based on those. So there's a kind of a complicated formula that goes with it. So yeah. Okay, so just as a reminder, what we're planning for between 2024 and 2044 is 3,887 new people, so population in Mill Creek. And then this is new, so this is new net numbers of people. Right now, well, in 2020 anyway, we had a population base of 20,926. The population target that we're allocated is 24,813. So the net new is the 3,887 that you see there. And then how that translates into housing units and as well as JAWS, which is really a separate calculation, is also shown here. So we have a need for about 2,500 new housing units in Mill Creek over the next 20 years, and about 908 new jobs in Mill Creek. And that's just within the city limits, not including the MUGA, which has separate targets. Okay, I'm gonna go move on here because we have a lot to cover and I don't want to be here all night with you. I'm sure you'd like to get this moving on. So what we're doing right now is we kind of have our heads down and we're doing a lot of calculating and analysis, and we'll be bringing this back to you in a future update. One of the things we're looking at is that 1110 legislation, which basically says that single family lots are allowed to develop duplexes and in some cases greater units along high capacity or in proximity to high capacity transit lines, unless they have been exempted through their HOA, CCNRs and whatnot. So what you see here is our initial take on what we think that means, that kind of light grayish purple color. Those are all of your HOAs. And of course, the Mill Creek Community Association is the big one in the middle. And we know that the Mill Creek Community Association has an exemption from House Bill 1110. The data and finding the requirements under different CCNRs for different plats and HOAs is a little bit elusive and hard to track down. So we're not able to absolutely confirm every single plat and what its requirements are, but we feel that most of the HOAs probably don't allow duplexes outright, while they might allow accessory dwelling units. So we're kind of, trying to look into that as much as we can right now and see what we can find. But certainly the MCCA doesn't. So you can see just from looking at this map that a very large land area within Mill Creek really wouldn't be subject to any changes in land use, because that's going to remain single family, and it's not subject to 1110. So we're not anticipating that there's going to be any land use changes there. At the same time, there has been some analysis of potential buildable lands that are still, redevelopable in Mill Creek. And these are these dark purple areas. So you can see even here by the East Gateway sub area to the east of that, there's still an undeveloped parcel there. And there's a few other undeveloped parcels here and there. But honestly, most of these are relatively small, and they're not going to get us to that 2,500 unit count that we need. Just if we, tried to count up all those, it's just not going to get us there. So
Mandi,
we're kind of just analyzing that. Yes, Councilman Cavalieri.
how come the sub area isn't included or shaded in some degree of purple?
That is a very good question. I'm so glad that you asked that, because at the time that the county did, and still to this day, when the county did their buildable lands review, that area was still zoned and is still zoned business, the two non-residential zones that it is. And so their thought, and it's relatively built out in that use today. So their thought was that there's really not a lot of redevelopment potential under that existing zoning. If we were to change the zoning, as we've been talking about, to more of a mixed use type of zone, then the redevelopment potential goes up. So we are studying that again, and we'll be bringing back some thoughts about how many units we think could be reasonably achieved in the Mill Creek Boulevard subarea with that change in zoning. So that's definitely one of our strategies to meet our growth allocations. And just to kind of go through that a little bit. So again, here's kind of our three sub areas. We've got the East Gateway, Urban Village, we have Town Center, and then we have Mill Creek. Each of those three are sort of focuses of energy for redevelopment, as you've seen with the farm in the East Gateway. Things have changed there. Town Center, some time ago, became a place of energy and a lot of redevelopment. Mill Creek Boulevard subarea has potential, as we have studied. And there is still some capacity for redevelopment in the East Gateway Urban Village. That area to the east hasn't been fully developed yet, but it was master planned. So that's something that we'll consider in our growth allocations. When we look at Town Center, though, there really isn't a lot of opportunity to increase density or make changes in Town Center throughout that we're aware of. And please correct us if we're wrong, or if you all have other thoughts of opportunities there. But it's really pretty well built out, limited redevelopment opportunities in Town Center. So that brings us to the previous study work that the city did for the Mill Creek Boulevard subarea. And this area really does have the most potential to accommodate growth and meet a good portion of our target. And then that doesn't mean that we need to redevelop all of the sub area. You know, remember we had looked at like a 30% level of redevelopment and a 50% level of redevelopment. So what we're analyzing now is still within those thresholds. But we'll be bringing that back to you. I'm just kind of giving you a preview to understand that that really is a targeted area. And it was the reason, frankly, why you all decided to study that area in the first place. Because, you know, we knew that we needed to meet our growth targets in the future, and we wanted to look at what are some of the most viable places. And frankly, one of the reasons why that's a good place to accept growth and have people living and working is that you have high capacity transit there. You have 2 bus rapid transit lines serving that area. You have shopping, you have services, you have infrastructure. And there's so much potential, you know, for public space and connecting to the North Creek Trail. The other thing that's kind of great about this area is it's really away from other single family neighborhoods. It's really focused in kind of a commercial area. So it has the potential to really be more of a viable, I don't want to call it an urban center because that almost sounds too dense, but just kind of like a village center, you know, a village place in the community with more activity, more people living and working in that area. And that's exactly what our regional policies and our state growth policies say we need to do, is look for those kind of opportunities that are served by high capacity transit and infrastructure.
You know, I think we all agree in spirit with that's a great opportunity. The plan that came back though, it was built out to the street and it was so tall that, you know, it didn't fit our look, our lifestyle and such. So I'm you know, you kind of remember that's what sent it back. So it has to be an area where, you know, we can put a lot of homes in, a lot of people in, but maybe not 5 stories tall, maybe less. It definitely is a great opportunity for mixed use. That's definitely true. That'd be a benefit to the people living there. And the parking and the traffic is an issue, but that could be solved. But I think it was just the creativity that went into the housing itself. You know, if there was a little bit, maybe a little bit less in regards to people, but a little bit more in regards to the look and the feel that it's wow, I want to live there. And again, if I just wanted an inexpensive place to live, what you came back with was a great alternative. It really was. I think I was one who said I could see the financials on this. It makes sense, but from a design and aesthetic, it didn't make sense.
For the 20th time, there was no specific proposal brought back. There was a series of recommendations, and the recommendation was that we could consider some residential on the west side of Mill Creek Boulevard. Those renderings were just that, and we were told you they were just that. They were representations of what it could look like, subject to if the council wanted to consider some housing there. It could be 2 stories, it could be 3, it could be 5. There was no proposal by the work group to put 5 stories or 6 stories in there. They were purely renderings to show what it could look like. Could be anything between what it was shown or less.
But for the 16th time, this is just an opinion that I wanted to mention.
I'm not questioning your opinion, but you keep saying there was a proposal from the work group that was sent back. There was no proposal. There is a series of 9 or 15 recommendations of things this council could consider and as part of a sub area when we do our comp plan. There was no plan. There was no proposal to do what was shown in those drawings. That was an example of what it could look like. So it hits a rod with me because it creates this perception in the public that there was a proposal to do this, and there wasn't.
You're absolutely right. There was no proposal, but there was a reaction to what was presented. So I just wanted to respond to the
Right.
reaction.
And that's a
you're
very
right.
fair discussion that we need to have if we consider housing of what is an appropriate level if we want to consider
Right.
it there, but there was no.
Absolutely right. There was no proposal.
There was no proposal.
And I will have to say there was a diverse reaction. There were some positives, positive reactions as well. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And
was
we
only
will be taking a little bit of a deeper dive into this, in future briefings. And just some of what our assumptions could be for the Mill Creek Boulevard area in terms of zoning. And we are in planning, we're not in design. It's kind of a tough nut to crack, what is the design, but we have talked a lot about the importance of design guidelines and good design standards in Mill Creek and making sure that that's, supported by the comprehensive plan policies. So just want to mention that too. So I'll just kind of quickly run through back to the comprehensive plan. Just a reminder that we'll have kind of an introduction section, community profile, which is basically done. I'm going to give you some highlights of that tonight. And then elements of the plan, which include environment, land use, housing. We have an economic development element that's taking shape in the plan. We haven't had one in the past, but we're kind of excited about that. Establishing some policies around, what do we need to do here to have a stronger economy? And I think many of you are aware and acutely aware of some of the challenges in town center, for example, and some of the challenges in retail in general, frankly. So what do we do to try to strengthen our local economy here? And what are some kind of longer term strategies? And you guys might also be talking about that in your strategic planning. So it'd be great to make sure we're dovetailing with leadership on that.
You don't have it highlighted on the map as a specific sub area, but are you looking at I'll just call it the Sprouts property, that area, the northwest corner of the city, as well as Thomas Lake, that property?
Yes, we are, and that is one of the areas that we're thinking of. It of course doesn't have the critical land area that the Mill Creek Boulevard area does, but we are looking at that. Yeah.
No, but when it comes to like Thomas Lake, we have Rite Aid now vacant, and I fear that building is going to remain that way for a long period of time, just like the university bookstore space has.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And we're just seeing a lot of consolidation in the grocery industry, and
yeah,
we're heavy in grocery stores in our city.
Yes, true. Okay, we will also have a parks, recreation, and open space element. One of the challenges for the city, and something to think about, is you really don't have a parks and recreation department, but we will have goals and policies that will help to plan for the future of parks, recreation, and open space. And that's a really important thing to your community. We've heard that in the past. And so it's something that, maybe as you think about strategic planning, is that something that you want to continue to put more energy into? Multimodal transportation, we have Transpo group on the team working on that particular element. So that's great. They know your city very well. And then we'll also have utilities, capital facilities as part of the comprehensive plan. And then we'll have an implementation and monitoring section. As part of the introduction, we'll include the community's vision. And in order to inform that, we have an online survey that's live now. So I've got the QR codes, and these should be in the council packet, as well as, if the public were to download the PDF of the packet, they could do a scan of these QR codes, takes them right to the survey. There's an English and a Spanish version. We just want to get the word out as much as possible that the survey is available for people to provide input about what they want to see for the future of Mill Creek.
Mandi, what's been the response so far?
So far, we really just launched this, about 2 weeks ago? So it's really fresh. And we don't have a heavy response yet. So we're working to do some social media postings and to get the word out. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to mention it tonight live to the public. And of course, all of you and your travels and connections, if you could let people know that this is open. And I know we're strategizing with your communications department and what we can do to publications in the newspapers and things like that to get more attention to it. So we're working on it. So this will be important. We also plan to do a number of other engagement activities. You know, over the holidays is not the greatest time to do that. So we're kind of heads down in analysis right now, but as the weather improves in the spring, we're planning to do some other things to really go out and get more input to the planning process. So just be aware of that. So I think last thing before I talk about next steps is just to briefly cover some of the community profile information. Why do we take the time to really understand this? Because it helps us really understand how your community is growing and changing to date. What are some of the demographics that we're seeing? And so, you know, we look at everything from population and how that's increasing, which it is here in Mill Creek, to race and ethnicity, how that's changing. You know, some of the changes that have been happening in the community over the last, you know, since 2010, for example, are important for us to note. You know, your community is becoming more diverse. There are, you know, more people of color and more historically underrepresented people than there ever have been here. And it's important for us to be aware of that, and also to make sure that we're including and engaging all the people in the community. So this helps us understand that.
What is the definition of region?
Of region?
Well,
In
there's
what
two
sense?
bars there, Mill Creek, and you're comparing us against the region. Is the region
Oh.
Snohomish County? Is it Snohomish
No,
and King
I
County?
believe it's the the Puget Sound region.
Puget Sound,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
And Kitsap.
And Kitsap, yeah, thank you. And then just, you know, where people are born is another way to kind of look at the diversity of your community. So we've been gathering that information, the different languages that are spoken in your community. It's important for us to understand this as well, so that we can make sure that we're providing language translation opportunities as part of our engagement where we need to. And then just kind of looking geographically at where different groups of people are living. So we have the 2020 census and the 2021 American Community Survey data that we look at, which maps things by census block groups. So
Which one is 2023?
Is your mic on?
oh, did I go? Do you want me to go back?
No, which one? I'm sorry.
No, these are both representing 2021 data from the American Community Survey. 2021, yeah.
Both.
Yes, they are. So one of them is showing non-Hispanic white populations by block group, and the other one is showing Asian. Yeah. And then demographics of age. I think you guys have heard me talk about the silver tsunami in the past. That's all of us that are getting old and gray and silver. So you are also seeing that happen in Mill Creek. You have a higher percentage of older people in your community than across the region, which you got a really nice golf course. I mean, and there's a lot of people that retire here, so that's understandable. Let's see, level of education. It's a very well-educated community compared to the region. Income is also something that is important for us to understand, because this directly relates to looking at housing affordability across the community and what's needed. So about 30% of the households in Mill Creek are cost burdened or severely cost burdened. And that might be kind of surprising, because you do have 58% of the population that is at $100,000 or more in income. But then you do have some other sectors of the community that are cost burdened. And that's one of the reasons why we really need to look at what are the housing income bands that need to help to be provided to help serve this need for these cost burdened households. So again, we'll be bringing back more detail on that in a future presentation. It's very interesting.
That detail going to include the cost burden in terms of ownership as well as cost burden in terms of rentals?
Yes, it will. And it also will look at just the number of units needed to serve that cost burden. Yeah. And that's again at the 2,500 unit gap. Quite a few of those need to be affordable at different levels to serve this demand. You guys have a lot of housing. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but you have housing that serves the higher income levels here, but not as much housing that serves the lower. And I'm not talking about very low income, but even like moderate income levels. So the people in the community that are teachers or police force, people that are working a living wage, you know, they have trouble finding affordable housing in your community. So.
And 42% of our population makes less than.
Is your mic on, John?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I was just noticing 42% of our population makes less than 100,000. It's gonna be very hard to find a house in Mill Creek.
That's right.
But there is housing around Mill Creek, very close,
Mhm.
that is affordable. So the question is, do we build more,
Mhm.
more housing for, you know, is there a need for more housing within Mill Creek or,
There is.
yeah, is there?
Yes, there
Well,
is.
because I look at all the housing that's just on the other side of the border. I mean, if we were
Which
to,
direction are you going?
I would be going,
North? Like
no, I'd be
along
going
120?
west.
Oh,
I would be
west.
going west and,
I see.
I would be going, south.
Okay, so remember the county also is looking at those income bands and
Yeah.
affordability needs. And they have to come up with a scheme to provide that level of affordability over there on the west side and to the south. You are responsible for what's happening inside your city. And you do need to provide that affordability level for your residents and the growth that you're allocated. Each city has that responsibility, so
So-
you're not alone.
So what I find interesting is if I make less than 100,000, is Mill Creek an ideal location to look for a home? Because if you look at the average cost of a home in Mill Creek, you'd say no. There's much better opportunities in other areas.
Yeah. And what the state legislation, you know, is trying to do is make your community more complete and more holistic so that the people that are your teachers that work in your grocery stores, that they can be part of your community and live in your community and they don't have to live outside of your community.
So does your survey include, because I'm thinking of all of the homes that we do have
Yes.
that are extremely affordable to people that make less than 100,000. I mean, I look at the small houses, you know, just past town center. I look at Hawthorne. I look at the housing that's right up 164th.
Yeah.
That's low income. I look at the farm that we just opened.
Yep.
We have a lot of homes. I'm just curious, does your survey look at homes?
It does. It,
Oh, good.
it
I wanna
looks
see
at
that.
every residence of your community and
No, I mean, do you show the availability, what kind of homes we have?
we will
available?
be bringing that to you
Oh,
in the
but it's not in
future.
this one yet. That'd be an interesting one to look at.
This is showing kind of what the cost burden is of your residents, of your population now. So we also know what the existing stock is of your housing. And we'll be presenting that.
I'd
And
like
then
to
we
see
also
that.
know,
Yeah.
we also know what you're required to provide for that 2,510 housing units. You know, how many of those need to be provided at each income level to serve this need in
That'd
your
be great.
community.
I would love to
So
see that supply.
you will be bringing it back to
Yeah,
you.
that would
Well,
be
Yeah.
good.
just to be clear, my understanding of the commerce guidance is we don't have to provide that. We just have to make sure our comp plan designations and zoning don't preclude it from allowing those
Correct.
income bands to be developed.
Correct. And I'm sorry if I was misspeaking in what I was saying. You just need to show that your zoning accommodates that and that you need to take proper steps to support affordability in housing. You know, it can't just be a simple matter of zoning. I mean, there are some incentives. And I think the work that was done last year in the housing action plan for Mill Creek looked at several strategies and incentives that could be implemented to help encourage more affordable housing options in the community. And we'll be bringing those back again, just as a reminder, as part of that next discussion. So-
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of comments real quick. I would say if you go back to that last
Oh, of
screen,
course.
that's
Yes.
fine. Cost burden, I think anybody would assume that that is probably relative to inflation, and that is across the spectrum and certainly not exclusive to our community. And secondly,
Right.
I would dispute some of the numbers you're saying about housing, because to Councilmember Steckler's point, I think we have about 9,800 units here, and about 45%, give or take, are apartment, with about 15 to 20% of those moderate to less income designated apartments. So for a city our size of 21,000, I think we're probably right there. And I know the last time we spoke to Clay White, we were well beyond the regional average of having affordable housing in our community. So I want the studies to reflect those, and the county does provide numbers now. You can get them.
Okay, thank you. Ready to move on to the last part? Okay, thank you so much. So I think just to finish out the community profile discussion, we talked about this, but the median income in Mill Creek is 112,000. And again, this is based on 2021 American Community Survey data, which is about 14,000 more than the region's median income. And then we just kind of look at income below poverty level and where that's located in this map. So it just helps us kind of understand where there might be greater needs. And interestingly enough, I mean, there are some lower income levels right in the middle of MCCA, for example, where there's kind of some higher density condominium housing. So, yeah, this area here is what I was thinking of, this 13.14 to 21.39%. Yeah. Okay, so where do we go now? What are we working on now? In addition to kind of crunching numbers, and we'll be bringing back a lot of those numbers to you soon in another update. We're going to be continuing to look at finishing up the vision survey, gathering information from your community on what your vision will be for the next 20 years. We have monthly meetings with your planning commission where we're working through each element of the plan and gathering input from them on goals and policies and other key considerations for the plan elements. We had a workshop recently to talk about transportation level of service standards. We'll be developing the actual draft goals and policies and background information for each element. Eventually, we'll get to the point of the capital facilities planning next year, and we'll be doing a SEPA checklist as part of the SEPA compliance for the comprehensive plan. And ultimately, we'll be coming back to you with a full draft of the comprehensive plan. It'll first go to the planning commission for formal review, and then they'll make a recommendation to you, and it'll come to you for review and potentially hopefully formal adoption. And that process all needs to wrap up by December 2024. We don't want to leave it till the end of the year, so we're going to try to get it done by the fall. So that's part of our work plan.
Particularly with the sub area, as you heard tonight. I mean, that's a very, I don't want to say sensitive, but it's going to be a tough discussion in the community. So I'm hoping that we have some more touch points with the council before something goes through the planning commission, gets up to us only to be kicked back. So
okay,
I think that we need to have some more discussions with the seven of us on that issue so that we stay on track. Does anyone disagree with that?
yes, noted. We'll work on that. I'm looking at Al. We'll make sure. That's why we're here tonight, and we definitely intend to keep coming back. So we'll make sure we program that in. Yeah.
Mayor, I'd also like to see us really try to get that vision survey out in some ways, thinking out of the box, like maybe sending them to the schools PTA, the peach jar that goes out to all the parents, things like that, so we can actually get some people participating in this survey and reach people that may not usually be tuned in and paying attention.
Or some posters at the coffee shops that have the QR code on it that people could.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, posters all around. That's not a bad idea.
Oh, that Santa parade's this coming up this Saturday, right? Okay. Boy, we'll have to crank out some flyers pretty quick. Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Santa parade too. I didn't know if we have staff. Oh, I know staff's going, but if we had a booth or anything or somewhere where staff would be to talk about the survey or anything.
Flyers could just be
No,
printer
that's-
paper, couldn't they, with a QR code? They don't have to be anything elaborate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Right.
have a design actually that we've developed a branding design with your communication staff. So I think we can crank that out pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Goes off.
Social media, send that out. QR code can go out with that as well.
Yeah, I think the communications department's working on the social media posts, right? That's my understanding. Yeah, okay. Well, I just want to thank you for listening, and sorry it took a little bit longer, but I'm glad we had the opportunity to update you this evening. So thank you.
I just have one question before you leave that screen. What does SEPA stand for?
SEPA, oh,
Yeah.
thank you. That's the State Environmental Policy Act. And it just means that anything that we do, whether it's a plan, that's a programmatic action, or a project that is an improvement, that it's reviewed for potential environmental impacts. And in some cases, that can be covered through existing protections that already are in place in your community. Like, for example, you have a critical areas ordinance that already protects natural areas. Or it could be, in the case of a project, you might have to do a traffic impact study that would show these are the types of improvements that we need to make to minimize traffic impacts, which are also environmental impacts. So that's what that is. Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you so much.
Martin? Were you gonna? I know he's here. Were you gonna introduce him? Do you want me?
I will, Mayor, thank you.
Okay.
Apologize for, I was requesting that Jason would be present with us as opposed to go on Zoom because I think it was important to have the Snohomish County Executive Office present. It's such an important piece of funding that we're receiving, the opioid settlement. So Jason Bierman is a senior policy advisor in the Executive Office. He'll be presenting us the programs at Snohomish County. Programs at Snohomish County. Sorry. Be presenting the program that Snohomish County recently got approved. They'll be working on a number of programs throughout 2024 as well. Some of the things to think about, this will be kind of a 3-phase process for us as we decide what to do with the funding. After the presentation this week, we'll have a study session next week, and the third bite, the middle of December, if you do not approve it next week, one way or another. So middle of December, you have an opportunity to decide what you want to do with the funds. As he presents, just think about questions you want to have that Jason's presenting on the presentation, so that you are ready for next week's study session. So with that, I'll introduce Jason. Thanks.
I'll run his slides, Martin.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, no music for the presentation. Martin, thank you so much. And I do sincerely apologize with the with the Thanksgiving weekend, I was visiting family up in Alaska, and like all best laid plans, it was leave it around noon and arrive here at around 4 o'clock and everything would be smooth. And then it's suddenly a 2-hour delay and I'm rushing over here and jumping into the middle. So thank you for your patience. Thanks, Martin, for having me here tonight. My name is Jason Bierman. I am a senior policy advisor in Executive Summers' office. I do want to go over what we are planning to do with our opioid settlement dollars. There are some components that are very specific to the county, but certainly we are looking for partnership and knowing that this epidemic affects all of us. I think it's very prudent for us to think about how we can work together. So someone promised to run my slides. Oh, there we go. Great, like magic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context, sort of where we have been as a county, and where we are going with our opioid settlement dollars. So next slide, please. So it's, for me, a little bit surprising. In my previous iteration, I was the emergency management director. So back in 2017, Executive Summers sent to me an executive directive asking me to start coordinating among the various county departments our response to the opioid epidemic. It has been a little over 6 years that we've been working together as what we call our multi-agency coordination group. I'm not going to lie, we had a little bit of a lull during COVID while many of us refocused on dealing with COVID and all the things that were associated with the pandemic. But we did continue to meet, and we have continued to work towards finding ways to mitigate the impacts of the opioid epidemic on Snohomish County. Next slide, please. A couple of the things that have changed since we were faced with the pandemic. One thing is fentanyl has arrived in force. We knew before or coming into 2020, fentanyl, we were tracking it. We have a lot of data that we monitor through partnership with our law enforcement community and our medical examiner and our providers. We knew fentanyl was on the way. It has arrived in force. You can see the statistics up there. We have numbers of people that are dying. We have numbers of people that are going to Providence and other emergency departments. It sort of spans the demographics. It is not, and again, I don't mean to stereotype, but back in 2017 when we started, the conversation was very much about homeless folks who were addicted to heroin, who were panhandling on street corners. That is not what we are dealing with fentanyl. It's every demographic. It is people that are working, that are not working, that are older, that are younger, white, black, other members of marginalized communities. It is impacting our entire community. I will say we have made a strong effort over the last 6 years to get naloxone or Narcan out into the hands of our first responders. So we are doing much better at trying to reverse opioid overdoses, but they are simply right now, there are so many overdoses, it's very hard to address how bad things are out on the streets. Next slide. The other thing that changed during the pandemic, we've seen a significant uptick in what we call polysubstance use. People are not just using one drug of choice anymore. Many folks are using methamphetamine as an upper to offset the sort of the depressing effects of fentanyl. Cocaine, the same thing. You can see on the graph, many of the people that are reporting, the vast majority are reporting that they're using more than one substance. And so again, when we started this in 2017, it was really a focus on heroin and misuse of prescription opioids that were being sort of illicitly found or used. Now we have much different problems than we had even 3 years ago. So next slide, please. So the executive has heard a lot from myself and from other folks. And so he has taken some action. And of course, if you're familiar with the executive, you know that his brother also died of an overdose very recently. A tragedy in and of itself. But he had heard from many of us the need to really reinvigorate the multi-agency coordination group. So back in May, he delivered a new executive directive, to the new emergency management director. There were some specific things in that directive. One was the creation of a disaster policy group. So that is something that we do during, I'm going to say, traditional disasters. We have policymakers who gather together to talk about what policy changes we can affect, for instance, during COVID, in terms of workforce, in terms of work hours. During earthquakes, we talk about, policy issues around reopening of roads. We had not done that previously during the opioid epidemic, but we decided that now this was important enough that we needed to have a regular meeting of policymakers to talk about what we could do to support the people on the streets who are doing the work out to mitigate the opioid epidemic. The executive directive also mandated that we, as a group, the multi-agency coordination group, we had very specific timelines to deliver updated goals, updated short-term objectives, and updated long-term objectives. The short-term objectives the goals and short-term objectives, I believe all of you have as a handout. I did send those over. We are now working through providing to the disaster policy group the long-term objectives, which will be approved here shortly. But we have continued to work on those, and those timelines became really important because it forced us to really talk about what are the things that we could do quickly. Next slide, please. And that came in conjunction with the opioid abatement and spend plan. That's sort of the formal name for the opioid settlements. Just as a brief overview, many of you probably know this. Snohomish County is part of an allocation region for the opioid settlements. This was negotiated by the AG's office. We're part of a 5-county region. We do receive our own funding. Each of the 12 cities that are in excess of a population of 10,000 receive their own funding. But we are joined as a allocation region in terms of there is what's called an opioid abatement committee, which I sit on behalf of the county, that oversees how the opioid settlement dollars are being used and ensuring that we actually comply with what's called the One Washington Memorandum of Understanding. So we're part of a 5-county group. We have started talking about ways we can work together. Our first payments from the settlement arrived in December of 2022. It was a little wonky at the start because the way the settlement played out, there was a double payment at first, followed by a payment for that first year. So it gave the appearance to some folks that there was kind of large chunks of money coming. That money will now sort of settle out over the next 15 years. It's not a huge amount of money. We've done an analysis of it at the county. It's certainly not infrastructure money. It can help with some programs, but in terms of the amount of money that's coming each year in terms of like buying a brick and mortar facility, it's simply not enough. So we've looked at some ways we could use it as it is. There are other settlements that will be forthcoming. The first one was with Purdue, sort of the large pharmaceutical companies. There are others that will arrive with the pharmacies, one that we expect to arrive fairly soon from Walmart. So there are further pharmaceutical settlements coming, but right now we're just dealing simply with the very first settlement. Next slide, please. So with our spend plan, and again, there are lots of conditions on this. We did reach out through our multi-agency coordination group to get community feedback. We met with a number of the mayors through both the executive standing meeting with the mayors, as well as direct outreach to each individual mayor from each city that was receiving opioid settlement dollars. As a county staff, we developed a spend plan, which has now been approved by our council. Phase 1 really focuses on some of the existing items that we were working on. We want to continue the coordination, and coordination is also through our Department of Emergency Management, being able to support the administrative impacts of the grants. There are lots of conditions that go with the One Washington MOU. There's a requirement to provide transparency and publicize how you're using the dollars through a website or some other public facing venue. We wanted to be able to look at other programs where we could work together to sort of mitigate the impacts of the admin and overhead for some of the cities and towns that were receiving smaller amounts. Our health department was very keen on getting another epidemiologist who is focused very specifically on opioids. We've worked really closely with our first responder community to enhance our Leave Behind program. We know that naloxone saves lives. There's lots of rumor out there that naloxone doesn't save the lives of people that are addicted to fentanyl, and that's simply not true. We know that it does. Sometimes it takes more doses, but we've worked really hard to get naloxone out to save people's lives. We've looked at additional data points that we can get to help us better understand how the epidemic is affecting our community. And a couple of things will be rolling out soon. We have a program that we mirrored somewhat off of our Office of Social Justice in a way to provide stipends to small community organizations like nonprofits that are working in recovery from opioid addiction and other areas so we can support them. We heard from lots of them that, hey, we heard from people that said, you know, literally, I run this nonprofit, but the way I fund it is I go to my day job and I take all the money I make and that funds my nonprofit work. So we've looked at ways to provide them, even if it's $7,000, $10,000, just to get them through a year of providing support to the people that they're trying to help. And then phase two, we're actually quite far along in working with a mobile opioid treatment program. We think it's a very good idea to have something that can move around the community. We know anecdotally and from providers that many people simply can't make their appointments. If they are showing up, at sometimes they are doing that at the risk of losing their job. They're doing it because what they can afford is transportation that day. We are looking for a way to get an opioid treatment program on wheels that can come out closer to them so they don't have to work so hard to get to treatment. And then we're also working hard with our schools to figure out how we can better educate kids at a much younger age. And I will tell you, our neighbors to the south in Oregon, and we're simply pushing for this, or I should say we're also pushing for this as part of our legislative agenda. They're talking about having these conversations with kids that are in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Kids that are being either indirectly or directly impacted by fentanyl and other opioids. We simply can't wait till they're in high school. So we're talking about how we can get education and educators into schools to talk with them before they're getting impacted and it's too late to help them steer clear of the potential for becoming addicted. Next slide, please. So some of the things we've done, so we're not just talk. We worked really closely with Fire and EMS. We reviewed the RCW that talks about how what their ability and constraints are to provide Narcan or naloxone to do Leave Behind. Our fantastic physician medical director for EMS has developed a protocol in conjunction with the state so that they can now do that. So we actually have EMS able to leave behind Narcan or naloxone to folks who have overdoses so that they have a chance to have someone close to them that can give them an antidote. Through our 2024 budget process, the county is planning to add an epidemiologist to the health department to focus on opioids, simply because there's so much to it. We've had many conversations with one provider. We sent out an RFP. We have a provider identified. We're talking about the mechanics, the nuances of how to establish a mobile opioid treatment program. What does the van look like? What do the routes look like? What does the delivery look like? We've worked really closely with Washington Recovery Line to develop a contract for additional data. And I mentioned we've worked really closely with our Office of Social Justice, to develop a program so we can, similar to what they do with their sponsorships, get dollars out into the hands of these community organizations that are doing the hard work out with people. And again, I obviously I work for government, but not everyone who's in that space wants to work with a government entity. So we have a lot of nonprofit partnerships out there who want to be able to help these folks, and many of these folks are more likely to be responsive to folks who are not government than they are to us. So we want to help them help us and help our community. Next slide, please. So with that, I've talked to Martin, we are certainly looking for partnerships. We think there are many spaces where, from the mobile OTP, education in schools, and just the naloxone delivery, I mean, all of those have a certain appeal. We're certainly interested and open to having partnerships with our city partners. And so that's an overview of what we're trying to accomplish with our dollars. And I'll open it up to any questions you might have about what we're doing, or ways we can partner, or just questions in general about how we're addressing the opioid epidemic.
Thank you for the presentation, Jason. Before we get to questions, Martin, can you remind us what is our allocation to the city under the settlement?
It's approximately about 10,000 a year, Mayor. We haven't collected, we'll probably be collecting upfront about 30,000 next year for the back revenue that we did not collect. Something to also keep in mind, if you don't mind me mentioning, is as you think about the opportunity cost of working with the county, you know, you're going to think about all the things that we could spend this money on here locally too. 10,000 could get a lot of things, but there are a lot of other ways to work with the county on this. There's also an administrative cost of this as well as managing the program. And I'm sure Jason's probably heard some discussion about that as well. And he may even have some numbers on that. Another thing is a question that I had, as well as other city managers and representatives, is how does this going to directly benefit the cities that are actually receiving the funds? And Jason, if maybe he can elaborate a little more on how these funds will directly impact us, or how we can utilize services. Keeping in mind that here at City Mill Creek, we outsource a lot of our social services. We don't have anything in-house, and so that's what I was kind of looking for, was ways that they would add value to Chief White police as well. So thanks.
Yeah, I think a couple of the programs I mentioned. So again, I sort of first want to make an overarching statement. The folks in our community that are suffering from this issue are not bound to one geography. They're not bound to one jurisdiction. They move, again, for different reasons, be it pressure from law enforcement, or just availability of services, other things. Like they're not a static population. So they are a moving transient population. So it's not just a single jurisdiction's problem. It's a problem that moves around the county. And so we've tried to approach it as, how do we address this as it's all of us? It's not just one jurisdiction or another. Anything we do in one jurisdiction creates, I've heard the analogy from the PA's office of the waterbed. Many of you may not be old. Well, most of you are old enough. So when you sit on a waterbed, right, back in the old days, like the rest of it sort of popped up. It's kind of the thing, you know, when we apply pressure in one place, things get worse in other places. There are programs like that we are looking at, like the mobile OTP, that we think are going to help people throughout the county. We're looking at ways we can partner. When we initially set out just with the funding we have, we were looking at one van on a very restricted route. If we have more funds available, we can talk with the provider about additional vans, about additional routes, about additional places where we can bring that service to people who otherwise are gonna either have to get into really kind of the core of Everett, Linwood, sort of the urban core, or we run the risk of them sort of falling off of their treatment regimen and relapsing back into their previous habits. The education component, I think, is something, again, if we're talking to all of our kids about the dangers of prescription opioids, synthetic opioids, all of these things. And I wrote a policy paper for the county that became part of our now legislative agenda. It's a little fascinating to me that part of our educational requirements in the state are, we have to talk to kids about marijuana, which is legal, but we don't have to talk to them about opioids, which are not, and which are killing thousands of people a year. So part of our programs as well is how do we find an educator who can develop an educational program that can work in school districts no matter where they are in the county, but provide a baseline of information for kids to understand. You know, I grew up in the era of, you know, scare tactics, right? Like of this is your brain on drugs and the frying pan and all those things. And now we talk about one pill can kill. I have a 14-year-old and I truly tell him all the time, it's not a joke anymore. Like literally when your friend hands you one pill and says, don't worry about it, this will be okay. That may be the last thing you do because fentanyl is that powerful. So I think there are some things that we can do in partnership with our cities to make sure our kids are getting educated, to make sure we've got access to opioid treatment programs that would be really helpful. And again, it may not be a simple measure of this many minutes in this city delivering to this many people, but understanding that it really is, it's an issue that affects all of us. And there is no sort of way to just put borders on it and say, what's affecting Mill Creek today is never going to affect Linwood tomorrow because it's a very transient population.
Questions? Councilmember Allison.
So, you know, I hear you have a lot of plans to deal with, you know, helping people that have OD'd come back out of it. What's happening on the supply side to cut down on the illegal sales?
Yeah, that is a huge issue. I would defer mostly to our law enforcement colleagues. I will tell you they work really hard. We set up a task force to focus on the 128th and Admiralty area. They work very hard to try and do the best they can to mitigate the amount of supply, but they have restraints, right? I mean, in this, we're talking on a magnitude that many folks don't understand. It truly is a supply and demand issue. We are one of the areas in the country that has the lowest cost per dose of fentanyl. So we do have a lot of work to do, but that is, I mean, and again, I don't want to, they're doing an amazing job, but you're talking about federal assets and international assets and folks who really, on a very large scale have to address that. So I think from our perspective, if we look at supply and demand, if we can help with the demand side, then we can help them address the supply side.
Great. And just one more question. Those agencies that you're, is it a grant system that you're using to provide funds to some of those private entities?
Yeah, it's actually part of our spend plan that was approved by council was to apportion a part of our opioid settlement dollars to go directly to those agencies in our community that are helping us. So we chose to do that as a county, recognizing that many of them struggle just to have enough operational funds just to work year to year. So as we developed our spend plan of the settlement dollars and looking at what was allowed under the One Washington MOU, we decided that a part of that was going to go out into the community. So those folks that are helping us. So it's not grants per se, because it's part of a settlement dollar. We're looking at more as a stipend or a sponsorship, which is the term we use with our Office of Social Justice, as a way to sponsor the work they're doing, to help us deal with this issue.
Councilmember Steckler?
I hope I didn't miss this part, and so I'm going to say that up front. Maybe this was covered, but you talked a lot about the fentanyl and the street addiction, but I was curious about what about the white collar addiction, the helping the people that I've seen firsthand that what's going on with the doctors now is that They're basically giving you a contract to sign, a physical piece of paper.
Mhm.
And you sign that and now they're covered. You're stating that you will only take the drugs according to them. And they really don't care what they do care. They will prescribe to you as much as they think you need, but the problem with that is you can go to another doctor and get a contract with that doctor, and you go to a third doctor. And I know this, you can get a contract with a third doctor and not even want to get it. They'll just give you one because they maybe they're helping you out on a surgery or something like that. But all of a sudden you've got 3 doctors that are prescribing Oxycontin to you and not even, and now all of a sudden you run that significant risk of getting addicted, which is easy to do. And then you get addicted and you're embarrassed that you're addicted, and where do you turn? And I don't know what services specifically you're providing to that person.
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic question, because there's a lot of stigmatization about who is addicted. And if we look at the statistics, it's generally people who are white males, 18 to 35. I mean, it's not, most of them are using in their homes. They're not using out on the streets. I think we have done a lot of work to work with the medical community in Snohomish County to talk about that very thing, as far as thinking about what prescription looks like and what overprescribing looks like. I know the health department has done an amazing job gathering doctors together to talk about what are the impacts of doing that. We have gone through again and so for me, this has been the last 6 years, identifying pharmacies that appear to be overprescribing or are filling prescriptions at a rate that's not really commensurate with our population, quite frankly. So we actually have done a lot of work behind the scenes. One of the things that I think is, as I'm talking about this, that I think is, again, really kind of the pressing issue, and I don't want to diminish everything you just said. We know that fentanyl is killing people. If I showed you again, sort of the trend chart, fentanyl is starting to kill people at a much higher rate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think right now, focusing on saving lives and mitigating the fentanyl issue is really at the forefront, because that is right now disproportionately the drug that is killing people in Snohomish County. I do absolutely think part of this whole conversation needs to be, how do we talk to all of the other folks who are using multiple substances, who are using other things? And again, I mentioned I have a 14-year-old who, has friends who say, hey, just try this. And he knows very clearly that one thing that they tell you won't harm you at all could be the last thing that you ever take in your life. So we are working to develop communication strategies to really talk about all demographics, about how the addiction side of this is really the piece. And that's where I go back to the supply and demand. The demand side is something that we can try and really work on with the resources we have through the settlement and other things.
Oh, I was listening to our city manager talk about small cities getting a portion, and it's not a really big piece, but if they could go together with other cities and maybe make a bigger piece that could have an impact. And when we talk about the addiction that's happening to I call it the white collar addict.
Yeah.
The white collar addict's biggest problem is they're embarrassed.
Yep.
Okay. But if there was a helpline that they could just talk to, they can be talked down off the ledge. They can be talked through a program of getting over the addiction, because there is I call it the crawl, walk, run ability to get off of addiction. And if cities could work together with the helpline, because it really doesn't make sense for one city to have a helpline, but if a number of cities had it and could help to support it, I think it would really make an impact. And I know what you're talking about with fentanyl, but we also know that before fentanyl stole the limelight, there was a huge amount of deaths from this white collar addiction, and it's ruining a lot of lives out there, family lives, and impacting a lot of people. And it's sad, because the biggest problem of all is the embarrassment. And that I think this program with the money that's available could help to fund that if cities, you know, if the opportunity was there and somebody like yourself could just coordinate that from a central location, people could get the help they need.
Yeah, and I think we're certainly open to that. I mean, I think we're open to other ideas. I don't want to assume that we've captured all the good ideas. We spent a lot of time talking about things that we thought were really impactful. But I'm not gonna claim we captured all the best ideas, so.
Captured a lot of problems. I was trying to think the only area that maybe that you hadn't impacted, but you certainly covered the other ones really well. I was just thinking it would be nice if we could also cover this one as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why we want to have this presentation to hear what the county's doing, because I believe our study session next week is to provide some direction to the staff on how we want to use our dollars. Do we want to find a way to go alone? Do we want to find a way to partner and find what our options are? Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for the presentation. I'll tell you my thoughts on the matter. $10,000 a year is really not a lot of money. It's a drop in the bucket. And so how best could we utilize $10,000 on a local level at a city level with a police department of 24 officers? That's where my struggle is, because government in this state has essentially created a culture of permissiveness when it comes to drugs through various means, whether it's allowing fentanyl being allowed to be legal for about a year and a half, or having 3 bites at the apple before you're arrested, or making it a misdemeanor, or marijuana. I mean, we can go on and on. There's this culture of permissiveness. And so I can't in good conscience try to give it back, the $10,000 to more government to try to deal with the problem, when I could put Narcan on the duty belts of my deputies here and make sure that, to your point, that they are saving lives at that most dire time or dire need possible. So and this is no slight on your presentation. I'm sure you're quite sincere, and I'm sure you're doing great work, but for the amount of money that we have, and the best bang we would have for our buck would be to arm our officers with some more training potentially, and making sure that they have Narcan, because the county is no longer giving us the Narcan now. So I would just as soon, as opposed to going out of pocket for supplying Narcan, and just utilize the dollars for that, which is an applicable use for those dollars. Thank you.
Do you mind if I respond?
Oh, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I totally understand. And one of the things that was on there that I maybe glossed over too quickly was part of what we are supporting with our dollars is the naloxone leave behind program for first responders. Like, I hear what you're saying. We want to put it in the hands of our first responders. We also want to put it in the hands of the people that are close to the people that have overdosed. So that, again, if it's sort of this function of time, if we can put it in the hands of someone who literally lives in the room next door, that may save the 3 or 4 minutes before an officer is dispatched to get there and help them. So I totally agree. It's a life-saving measure. And we've had great success with putting Narcan and naloxone in the hands of law enforcement throughout Snohomish County. So no qualms here. I think that's, at the end of the day, saving lives. That's for now the way we do it.
Martin, can you clarify, is it 10,000 a year, or is this a one we do get for how long?
That's correct. 17 years, I believe.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Paddock.
First of all, thank you very much for the work you're doing for the community. It's obviously a horrible epidemic, and what you do really helps a lot of families. So thank you for that. I don't know if you know anything about what's happening with South County Fire. Is there anything that the Snohomish County is doing in partnership with South County, and maybe you could share a little bit of that?
Yeah, I can. That was the last, sorry, my presentation disappeared, which is probably good because nobody pays attention to it anyway. We actually engaged with them. I'll try and make this the same. So there was a lot of controversy about the ability of fire departments to provide leave behind naloxone, because they primarily function as an emergency medical service. So they are called, they show up, they do work. They're not really, it was sort of a gray area of could they leave behind things that might prevent them from doing other work. So we worked really closely with them and eventually through DOH to determine that yes, under the current RCW, they actually can do leave behind work, which mitigates their ability or their need to show up in other places. And it's kind of that same concept of leave behind naloxone, and hopefully when the call comes, someone's already administered 1 or 2 doses and it's not quite as dramatic. So they've been a great partner. They stepped up really quickly and said, yeah, we would love to talk about how we can make this happen. Sean Maxwell in particular and I worked together with the physician medical director to figure out what the right standing orders were. So they've been great in terms of saying, yeah, we had some constraints, we figured out how to work around them, and now we have a mechanism for being able to get naloxone into people's hands when we leave an overdose to say, hey, we're leaving, we know this might happen again, here's naloxone in case it happens again, so you can administer in those minutes before we're called to get here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Mayor, this
Yes.
this technically is not a question, it's more of a comment for some information for the next stage, the conversation next week. In regard to Councilmember Cavallari's mention of Narcan for the police officers, I thought the health department was providing all the officers with Narcan. So could we actually look into that and get that information for our discussion next week? Because I think that would be an important piece to have to bring to the table.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think city manager has taken that note.
Perfect.
Councilmember Allison.
So I get giving the first responders, making sure that they have ample supply. But is there any distribution of those to like store owners that might deal with people that collapse in their storefronts or behind their buildings?
Yeah, so we had conversations. I'm going to speak to just the settlement dollars. We had conversations early on. There are some places throughout the United States that use actually Narcan. What would you call them? Dispensaries, like a candy machine, but you actually can get Narcan. So we talked about Narcan distribution in that way. The state has allowed, under a standing order, anyone who is in close proximity or a relative of someone who's an addict to be able to get Narcan. There are ways they can do that for free. So we deferred to those programs for folks. We've done a lot of work to try and amplify that messaging around how you can get free naloxone from the state. In lieu of doing things like being able to provide mobile opioid treatment programs. So we had a really robust conversation around the efficiency and efficacy of that. Kind of where we landed was folks were able to get that free and through this standing order, and the operational cost of making sure that the machine is working and available and stocked and is in the right location just sort of outweighed folks' ability to do it on their own. So we looked at that in depth, and the kind of the agreement of the group was in and among the things that we could do is that was one that probably wasn't going to be as effective as some of the others.
And is that program accessible to anyone just by going to any pharmacy, or do they have to engage a state agency?
No, either way, they can go in under the standing order and say I have a relative who is an opioid addict and I would like to have naloxone. There's also a way, and I can send you all the web link afterwards. There's a site where anyone in Washington can sign up to get, and it's actually fairly easy to get naloxone for free. And I've known friends who do it, like in Everett, who got it because they're walking around, and want to have naloxone available in case they come across someone who's experiencing an overdose.
Well, thank you, Jason, for taking the time to spend with us after what sounds like it was a long day of travel for you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
So
Thank you for having me.
No,
Thank
thank you
you.
for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that brings us to our old business for the night. Mr. Horn is gonna start us off.
I have no audio for you.
Is the mic on? You got the mic.
Do you have the lapel? I don't think that one's on.
Joe? Do you have a cape?
I was gonna say, we should get him a kid.
IT man.
Okay, oh, here we go. I think we're good here.
Yep.
Thanks. All right, good evening, council. I don't have any new information to present on this proposal. Just as a quick reminder, we're talking about through rezoning this parcel on Bob Lever Highway from LDR to community business. However, before you take action, the applicant requested to share a few words with you. He wanted to be here in person, but he had prior commitments he made before we scheduled this meeting. So he's here on Zoom. If you are able to share some words from him.
Yep, that'd be great. Adrian, are you in control of the screen? Can you minimize the?
Stop share.
There we go. Thanks. Mr. Bedrosian, the floor is yours.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute. Oh,
You're on mute.
oh, we have to unmute him.
1 second.
Just call Joe.
All right, Steve, you can unmute.
There we go. Okay, thank you for that. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a reminder, my name is Steve Bedrosian. I am the owner of the property at 13529 Bob Lever Highway. I apologize for not being able to present in person. I have a newborn that's kept me at home, so apologies for not being there. Having been part of this community for as long as I could remember, I'm here not just as a property owner, but as a dedicated member of this neighborhood. Nearly 2 decades ago, I purchased this land with a vision to contribute to the well-being of our community. Today, I bring forth to the city an opportunity for improvement, having learned valuable lessons from our failed attempt at rezoning this property to medium-density residential a while ago. We took that experience to heart, actively listening to the feedback received from our neighbors, planning commission, and members of this council. The result is our current proposal, now in this final stage, seeking a designation of community business. And to summarize, in the second attempt, we diligently followed all the required processes outlined by the comprehensive plan amendment. We secured the crucial support and approval of the planning commission. We garnered the support of our neighboring residents and the homeowners association. Addressing concerns head on, we happily went above and beyond the information gathering requirements in this phase and presented traffic related research that indicated minimal impact. And we meticulously met all the comprehensive plan's objectives associated with the community business designation. Our property, being the sole low density residential entity facing and access from Both Levered Highway, holds a unique position and a unique opportunity to align with the city's improvement goals and guidelines. I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the Planning and Development, Planning Commission, neighboring residents, and the HOA for their collaborative spirit and support throughout this journey. In conclusion, we humbly seek your support in granting the community business designation, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Bedrosian. Do we have the cheat sheet? So if anyone wants to make a motion to get some discussion going,
We do. We do, yes.
thank you.
I'll move to adopt ordinance 2023. Fill in the blank, amending the land use and zoning maps of the city of Mill Creek Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Mayor, can I ask questions now then? Since that's technically not a discussion.
Yes, you may, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have a question because the gentleman that spoke earlier at the beginning of the meeting brought up a point that they felt that the commercial, if the property is commercial, that HB 1110 won't affect it. And it made me think about, and I forget the bill number, the bill that the Senate tried to pass last year that was requiring higher density from the bus lines that did not pass. I'm trying to remember if it's commercial property and they bring that bill back, would it be affected in a way that it's not if it stays residential? And I'm sorry, that sounds like a very complicated question, but it kind of is, I guess. Does anybody remember from that bill if it would be different, whether or not it was commercial or residential? Remember, it was the one where they were requiring the high density from so far from a bus stop?
So it's my understanding that if it were zoned commercial, those house bills would not apply.
Okay, thank you.
Now that we have the cheat sheet used, can we minimize that so we can see the other participants in the meeting? I'm not sure who has control. Thank you. There we go. Okay, any other discussion? No other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Motion passes 5-1-0. Is that correct? Thank you, Justin.
All right, thank you for your time.
Okay. I'm gonna hold off on asking for an extension of the regular meeting for now. Deputy City Manager.
I think it's muted.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to make this fairly quick. So we have had quite a few aging vehicles in our current city fleet. We typically do keep vehicles about 10 to 20 years right now, and we've been purchasing them outright. So maintenance costs have been very high. And we are looking for a more strategic approach to how we purchase vehicles. So annual maintenance for police vehicles is normally about $45,000 a year, and then city vehicles is usually just around $13,000. I will say that does include the street sweeper in that for the city side. It does. So that should help when we get that here in the next couple months, some. This year alone, we have spent just under $70,000 for police vehicle maintenance, and we are right at $14,000 on maintenance, with the majority of that for the city side being related to the street sweeper.
How many vehicles is that, for instance, on the police side?
I want to say around 21. Is that? You guys have
3,500.
I think we have it in the slides.
Oh, okay.
I think it's around 21.
Yeah, 11 and 21.
Yep, okay. So I do have Joe with Enterprise Fleet that I will have help me here in a little bit, and he can go through some of the slides that we've been looking at. Good. So the city has considered normal leasing programs, just continuing our purchasing program. We do think this fleet equity lease program is a great option for the city, and at this point in time, we didn't see any reason not to go forward. So things that this would help with, the enterprise fleet management will reduce wait times for our vehicles. So At this point in time, we do have 2 vehicles that are down on the city side. We have 2 different trucks. One of them would be pushing the plow if we were to have some kind of snowstorm. We do have a backup contract, I believe, in place now, just in case we are not able to get these purchases made. But that would be some very substantial maintenance costs that we would have to come up with if we did decide to not do this fleet equity lease program, because we wouldn't be able to get the vehicles soon enough, because there's a very short amount of time that you can order vehicles annually. And then your wait times are currently still around 15 to 18 months. So it is very challenging to get the vehicles that we need, especially police vehicles and the different city trucks that we need. So Enterprise will be able to help maximize our vehicle equity resale values, and they will be recommending times when we should be selling the vehicles. So I think Joe may go over this, but it's typically more around 3 years, 3 to 5 years, so that you can get that resale value and get another vehicle. This will help to standardize budget costs and avoid any of those large capital investments. And then we will have vehicles replaced more frequently, so this will help with the staff safety. So if you think about a truck that's 20 years old, there are a lot more features in the newer vehicles that are not found in those older models. Things that will be helping us, Enterprise does use the city's Sourcewell ILA, so that does help us with the pricing. So they will use that and their economies of scale to be able to get us the best vehicle pricing nationwide. And then the other thing that I wanted to make sure I covered is they will be helping, they'll handle the vehicle maintenance costs. So they have staff that verifies and approves the different appropriate shops. They recommend maintenance, and this will save us a ton just in that alone. So they'll have lower maintenance costs and less staff time working on that. So they do have an entire team that handles these specific kind of issues. And then to top it all off, the great news is that this is estimated to have a neutral budget impact. So all of the normal processes where we bring any kind of purchase or sale will still come to council. That process will not change. And then vehicle purchase will continue to come out of the city's equipment reserve fund. So we will be replacing vehicles more frequently, but overall this should be budget neutral. And so with that, I will hand this over to Joe, and he can run through some of the slides that we've worked through and that he's put together.
So just so I understand, this is a study session to present to us what you're going to be bringing back to us for approval to go forward with this?
Yes, we wanted to make sure that everyone was in agreement that they were comfortable moving forward before we put something in front of you to pass.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurel, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. Yeah, I appreciate taking time to review this. Yeah, as Laurel mentioned, not a lot of folks are too familiar with what Enterprise has to do with municipal fleet vehicles. Obviously, rental is pretty well known. And really, in short, our job is to help the city maximize its capital dollars and operating dollars and lower the cost of the fleet long term. What this typically looks like is capitalizing on the low miles that the city vehicles drive, the strong buying power the city is entitled to by being a government entity in the state of Washington, and adding in Enterprise's ability to analyze when to sell vehicles and to sell them for significantly higher returns than we would expect to get at a public auction. What that does to the overall cost of the vehicle is it typically makes it so the least expensive point to replace each vehicle will usually be a lot sooner than most people would think. And it's those three factors combined. And so entities like yourselves are most able to mirror what we do with our own fleet vehicles. We think of what we do on the rental side. We buy vehicles really cheap because of the volume, just like you guys are entitled to do. We don't drive too many miles on them, and then our job is to pinpoint exactly when to sell them and for the most amount of money possible. So enterprise role would be to function as an advisor to provide the city and the council the analysis each year going forward to continue to lower that cost and pinpoint when to replace vehicles. A quick note too on when we say open and equity lease, there's a really important distinction to make between the lease that a lot of folks might be familiar with on the retail space, which would be what we call a closed-end lease, which is essentially a rental contract where you have to give the vehicle back and their wear and tear penalties and stuff like that. And then the city would not receive any money. So that really doesn't have any place in this conversation. An equity lease is simply saying, okay, if it makes sense to replace a vehicle at 3 years and we can buy it for 30, we anticipate selling it for 20 in 3 years or 25. We can just finance the vehicle from the starting cost to some balance well below the resale value and avoid the city outlaying all the capital up front. Wear and tear penalties and over mileage fees and damage charges, none of those have any place because the equity is property of the city. So it's the city's equity. So I'll walk through a couple things, but please feel free to ask questions. The whole point is that everyone has a really clear understanding of how the program works. So you should all have this in the packet. Quick summary, I think this is pretty well summarized what Laurel had described earlier. Yeah, it's take advantage of safer vehicles, bring down our acquisition cost, lower our maintenance and our fuel expenses, improve the resale values, which is the critical part for the numbers to work, and just make it so that the employees of the city enjoy driving the vehicles, they get where they're going safely, and it's as safe as possible. And as new technologies like electric vehicles become more cost effective, it'll put the city in a position to be able to take advantage of those without a huge capital outlay and without waiting 20 years to replace the next vehicle. So we do, with some pretty conservative numbers on the, especially in the maintenance front, we anticipate basically a cost neutral impact, $21,000 over the next 10 years between the police and the white fleet, that's what we call it. Here are the numbers of what we project vehicles to be in the partnership. Kind of here's where the white fleet of the city stands today. A pretty good portion is pushing the 20+ year mark. Really only purchased a couple since.
Hey, Joe.
Mhm.
Make that a little bit larger. I think they're having a hard time reading the numbers.
Yeah, appreciate that.
While we're dealing with that, can we have a motion to extend the regular meeting till 9?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. I'll try and be as brief as possible. This is a snapshot of where the white fleet, meaning non-police, is today, just from a model year standpoint and a vehicle class standpoint. Some of these are, as Laurel mentioned, inoperable at the moment. So the plan for the white fleet that we had laid out is basically replacing 6, 3, 0, and then we're these last 6 will get the final vehicles into the fleet. Comparing to purchasing one vehicle at $45,000 a year, the lease budget would cap at $104, and each year we would anticipate having between 3, depending on how many vehicles come back for replacement, between $98,000 and $3,000. It would be property of the city to take as cash general fund, or what's more common is rolling those funds into the replacement vehicle for each department. We anticipate a very significant drop in maintenance costs, somewhat of a drop in fuel costs, but annual miles are fairly low. so it's hard to do too much there. With an overall impact of 53,000 over 10 years, and an average age of about 3 years old in the fleet. I have a similar analysis for the police vehicles. And due to the nature of the high cost, heavy wear, and less of an appetite on the resale market, police vehicles, when we switch to replacing them a little faster, we'd anticipate costing the city an average of about a wash for about $3,000 each year to keep the vehicles for a pretty short cycle, about 4 to 5 years for most of the vehicles. Similar impact, lease budget would cap at 225. We'd have between 32 and 215 coming back each year in equity from each vehicle. Maintenance would take a pretty substantial drop, as most of our vehicles be replaced before they hit 100,000 miles in the odometer. You might have noticed, as Laurel mentioned, our projections for current maintenance spend are also a bit low. But all in, the total impact would be a cost of 32 grand over 10 years. Case studies from some of our clients today. Not going to go through them, but I would probably recommend reading through them if possible. And then current clients here in Washington and the Northwest that might not be a bad idea to touch base with.
Councilor Secretary, did you have a question?
Yeah, Joe, I do have a question. Could you go back to your numbers?
Yeah. Figured it'd be good to probably
I was trying to read these, and we have a little bit of an audio problem, so I apologize. Trying to understand you. What I wanted to see was, if we were to purchase, I don't know, 5 vehicles or 10 vehicles, and keep them for, what was our average? Replace it 12 years, I think somebody said. Yeah, so
probably 20, I guess, would be about average.
Oh, we keep them 20 years? No, say, yeah, whatever the average is, we would, I don't know what it is, but let's just say it's city cars or police cars are maybe 12 years at most, right? 10?
Yeah, police cars were faster for sure.
7 or 8. Okay. So what I want to see is the average of X number of cars times whatever the average number of years are. We purchase them, we do the maintenance, and then we sell them, and we get something, pennies in the dollars, whatever. But so we get some money back. So we spent some money, we get some money back for the cars, and then we have a net outlay for those cars over a 7-year period. Let's say whatever it was. Then what would it be if we were to lease those vehicles over a 7-year period? What would be our costs? What would be our outlay at the end of the 7-year period? That's kind of what I wanted to see in a very simple financial. What's that comparison? Buying them versus leasing them. And that's the comparison I'd like to see for the study session.
Yeah, can do. It'll take me, probably won't be able to turn around tonight, but yeah.
No, yeah, I think next week.
I think the key here is that maintenance has been the problem. And
Yeah,
it's
put the
been
maintenance
so
in.
unreliable, like we don't know what it will be.
Whatever.
But we can, we'll
historically-
definitely
Yeah,
estimate,
historically
'cause
it's been
roughly about
X.
13,000 a year. Yeah.
And then when they take over maintenance, I assume we're still gonna pay for it though, right? We pay for the maintenance.
Yep, it's in there.
But they're gonna, coordinate it for us, but there's still gonna be a cost, right?
Maintenance should come down just
On a
because.
leased vehicle, do they pay for the maintenance?
So we pay for the police, and then we've got the maintenance in here. So that's been calculated in here, yes.
Yeah, so on a leased vehicle, do we pay for the maintenance or do they pay for the maintenance?
We do, because we are still, so this is a lease, it's an equity lease, so it's not quite the same.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we would have the cost of the lease, we'd have the cost of fuel, we have the cost of maintenance, whatever it is, apples to apples. And if you want to take fuel out, we could take fuel out. If you want to take maintenance out, you could take maintenance out, because I assume the maintenance, if we own the vehicle or if we lease the vehicle, will be the same, wouldn't it? If they're doing maintenance or we're paying for maintenance, would it not be the same? Are you saying that they can do maintenance at a lower cost than we can?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I would anticipate.
That's something I'd like to see.
They can buy the cars at a lower cost.
And they
I
can buy the
think,
cars at a lower, well, the lease is gonna be lower than buying, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that, but whatever, they're gonna make some money leasing it to us. So, but at the end of the lease, we don't get any money back. At the end of when we liquidate the vehicle, we get something for it, something. I don't know what, but it's pennies in the dollar or something for the vehicle.
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple insights there I think might be helpful. So with an equity lease, we should have quite a bit of money coming back to the city. I think it on average 7,000-8,000 per vehicle. So meaning we've overpaid for the vehicle and paid 7,000 or 8,000 past the resale value at the end of the term. So that would be property of the city with the lease model. Then as for the lease versus cash decision, we do have clients, government clients that pay cash through us, Skagit PUD, for example. It's not real popular. And really when it comes down to it, even if keeping vehicles less time would save the city money in the long term, it's usually budget prohibitive to come out and pay cash for the amount of vehicles that it would take to get onto a 3 to 5 year cycle. Not that it's not doable, it just tends to be a little tough to find that much cash in the budget, and then it just kind of lives within the fleet from that point forward. Which is why you tend to see vehicle purchases getting pushed off a year, because it's really easy to do that, and then it ends up with a situation where maintenance costs are going up.
Joe, IT Joe, can you turn the volume up? Because I don't think they can make out.
Yeah, we can hear, we can't understand Joe, the car guy.
IT Joe is on his way.
It's a mic problem. Yeah.
I think it's a speaker problem. We've had a problem.
Oh, the speaker problem, maybe, yeah. Yeah, but
IT Joe is on his way.
Here comes IT Joe. And I like the way he makes me so excited when he comes in a room.
Joe, can you say some words, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Can we assume everything I said prior to this was brilliant?
For some reason, we're getting audio from the projector, so that's what's happening.
How is this? Any better?
Better.
Going off the side, I think maybe not.
Yeah.
Right now. We have to reboot the system in order to.
Okay.
We found his kryptonite.
That's all right. I mean, again, we're gonna go over this again next week, but I think what would be really helpful for all of us it would be a comparison of 5 vehicles, 10 vehicles, whatever you recommend, on a lease program versus a purchase program. Just show me that and make it apples to apples. That would be great.
Yeah.
I assume he has that.
That's basically what the chart is.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't have the other side of the chart showing what the purchase cost is, because we have the net difference down. So we just need to see that.
Yeah, it'd be like 2 charts. Yeah, as opposed to integrating it together. It's kind of confusing the way it's set up here.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you. Baked into those numbers, is that the like the police vehicles having to have them outfitted? Is that included in the maintenance?
Yep. Yeah, we're to Chief White on numbers there. And one thing, just make sure I clarify that might not have the top line in each of these is saying, hey, this is what you guys spend today. If you're to go buy a vehicle, you would spend on average $45,236 based on aggregate vehicle type. And this is the white fleet and similar for the police fleet. You'd spend $12,000 in maintenance. That's a little bit light. 28,000 in fuel, all in that. To buy a vehicle a year, it will cost the city $85,000 in cash, which works out to a little bit more than it would cost the city to lease 6. So we have 66 in the lease, 21,000 from selling the 6 vehicles that are now moving over to a lease. Maintenance would drop from $12,000 or a little bit more, down to $8,000 as some of the vehicles have a guaranteed maintenance program, and the rest of the vehicles are a little bit newer. Fuel would take a little bit of a drop. How's my audio, by the way? Better than before the IT Joe?
It's a little better.
Fuel would take a little drop. So all in, the budget impact would be about $7,400 to lease 6 versus buy 1. It would be a savings of $7,400. The next year, we'd anticipate 3 more replacements, leaving the city with 2 owned outright, 9 on lease. Lease budget would go to 90. We'd have 8,000 coming back from selling those 2 vehicles for $4,000 a piece. Maintenance would go down again. The fleet gets a little bit newer. Fuel will go down again as well. Total budget would be 25 more expensive than if the city bought 1 vehicle. As we continue to switch over the owned fleet to a lease fleet, the lease budget will go up with our last year of switching from an owned vehicle to a lease vehicle, and the lease budget being $104,844. At that point, we'd have our final 2 vehicles to sell for $8,500 a piece. We'd also have our first leases coming back, where we'd anticipate $47,000 in equity. And then maintenance at this point would be fully guaranteed at $4,800 for the year for the fleet. Fuel, gonna stop assuming we make improvements on fuel economy at that point. All in the fleet budget would be $21,000 in a typical year. And as we add up the cost impacts over the 10 years, that's where the $53,874.
So we would be making money going with the fleet versus purchasing outright.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. Quick question. So does the city still have the autonomy? Let's say we tell you we want to retrofit the fleet of police cars with Fords. Is that something we can do and put Fords, or does Enterprise say, no, we're doing Chevys this time around, they all have to be electric?
Yeah, it's a good clarification. No, the city is in complete control of every vehicle that comes in and out down to the last mountain bolt.
Thank you.
And as to when as well.
Yeah, so if we decide we want to keep a vehicle longer, we can. We don't have to sell it. It's just, that's what they're gonna recommend. So they're gonna give us recommendations on, hey, this is how you're going to maximize the value of each vehicle.
We're really paying for their expertise and their scale. Right? Their expertise on when to sell, how to maintain, whatnot, and the scale and pricing that they get from buying literally, probably tens of thousands of these vehicles versus 1 or 2 a year that we would pay.
Right. And we would be, if we were only doing public works, then we would be making quite a bit of money. But PD is just harder on their vehicles and a little bit more expensive because of the outfitting specifically. And if we do both, then we will have someone in Seattle helping us and giving us the recommendations versus someone out of state.
Any other questions? Is that the end of the presentation?
Yes.
Other questions? Okay, I guess this will be brought back to us next week.
Was there anything, did you want me to get the information separated differently?
No, I would like to see an analysis, apples to apples analysis.
What we would pay
How that
purchasing
savings, the different.
5
versus 10 days.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda for the night. Item A, approval of checks number 66734 through 66808 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $531,238.07. The audit committee was myself and Councilmember Allison. Were there any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions. Item B, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $232,700 $612.71. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions. And item C, city council meeting minutes of November 14th, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda is approved 6-0. Reports, staff.
Thank you, Mayor. First report is on behalf of Marketing Communications. There is a tree lighting event at 5 o'clock, City Hall. Prior to that, 3:45, there's a Santa parade that starts at LA Fitness on Mill Creek, Main Street, sorry, and it will end at City Hall, which will where the tree lighting event will commence at 5 p.m. Also in Town Center, Mill Creek Town Center is hosting a Santa's Coming to Town free train ride from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the north end of Town Center. The Windermere office will also offer photos with the Grinch from 2 to 3 p.m. and again after the parade till 6 p.m. And I'll hand it over to our, no other questions, I'll hand it over to our Public Works Director for his reports. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. A couple of things on winter prep, just to let you know, the weather forecast is probably warmer and wetter or maybe not. We don't really know. So here we go. We've got 2 trucks this year. As of 2022, remember we bought the International Switch and Go truck, which gives us a large plow. We've got a smaller plow on PW5. It's an old workhorse. It's one of the trucks we were just talking about that we hope will not fall apart. We do have a sander and a de-icer, so we were pretty well equipped. But what's happened to us this year is that we have a crew of 5 plus a supervisor who are all capable of driving, but we've got 2 of those people out. And so our concern is the next couple of months between now and the middle of January for one, and between now and the end of March for another, we will have a crew of 4. So what we've got, as the Deputy City Manager referred earlier, we're working with Edgemont Excavating. Again, that's the company that helped us in 2021 when we didn't have equipment. They have a plow and a smaller skid steer loader. And so we're getting a contract with them to have them be on call and then charge us by the hour if we need to call them out. We've worked an MOU with our ASME unit to make it clear that this is a support for our crew and to keep them safe. And it would probably be only called into effect during extended events. So small events, we'll be able to handle them. But as you've heard us talk about before, if you go 2 or 3 days with 12 hours on, 12 hours off, that doesn't last very long before we get concerns for the safety of our crew and for the community. So that's kind of our plans for winter prep. You may have seen that we used the de-icer over the weekend. We had a lot of cold weather recently, and so we put some de-icer down. Luckily, it wasn't very moist, but we got through our first mini event that way, and so I'm proud of the crew for being able to handle that with Keegan out. Second thing, I'm going to have Adrian bring up a couple of photos for us here. You remember a few weeks ago, we had an action item for you to talk about buying a loader. And so I want to let you know that it took us about 160 hours as a city from the moment you approved it until we got a PO issued. And within 8 hours, or excuse me, less than a day after that, it was delivered. So it was delivered Wednesday morning. And we had a lunch and learn exercise and got to do some training with the crew. So a couple of just fun photos here. This is, you may recognize this as the youngster that bought his first car and he's got the paperwork in his hand. He's going to go jump into it. And so this is Jason being excited about getting into the loader just after it got pulled off the truck out in front of City Hall. Next photo. And here he's sitting in the thing looking pretty good. Next photo. What's the thing a bunch of guys do? They open the hood and want to look to see what the power plant is. And so we got a full tour of the machine in terms of its capabilities, but also got a good run through from the gentleman on the left is a trainer that came with this. He walked us through in terms of taking care of this vehicle. This is something that will have a 20-year life. It's not on a lease program. We expect to use this for 20 years or more. It will stand up with that kind of use. Next slide. Of course, everybody got a chance to sit in the driver's seat, and the trainer got a chance for everybody to pick up and put down the forks, and then try some putting on and off the bucket. And so, next slide. Of course, if one guy's getting to drive, what happens? The rest they're all waiting in line. It's just like the kids out in front of the grocery store. I want a chance to drive this thing. So everybody did get a chance to get out that day and drive a little bit. Right now, it's parked. because we want to make sure we get a good system going. So when Keegan comes back, he's going to get that set up. But we will be using that for this winter to load sand and salt into our equipment, and potentially we're pushing some snow around. Last slide here. I want to warn you that if you see this in your rearview mirror, you want to get out of the way. This thing weighs 10 tons, 20,000 pounds. So don't be in front of their loader. And thanks, Adrian, for bringing those up. The second report I've got for you is the report from the fire, from Snohomish County Fire. I've been participating off and on for quite a while as a non-voting representative to the Fire Commission. Just as you did a couple of weeks ago, you passed your budget. They passed their budget and their property tax levies last week. They're in pretty good shape. By annexing folks like us first and then Montlake Terrace and Briar, it does give them an infusion of cash in terms of revenue that comes in to go from undervalued contracts into full membership. And so it makes the numbers really look pretty good. They were able to pass a balanced budget that is balanced in the short term. There may be some catch up to do long term on that with respect to capital, but they've done a good job of balancing it in the short term. And that even took into account dealing with during COVID, they had a long delayed contract negotiation, and that had a big bump in the salary line, but they were able to make it a balance. They did that with just a 1% property tax increase, the statutory amount, a 1% increase in the EMS, again, the statutory amount. And then according to what they had promised us before, their plan was to only increase the fire benefit charge by 2%. That's what they did. So very happy budget event for this particular year at South County Fire, and that passed with unanimous support. That's the good news. I will bring up that me on my way out, I didn't want to let them go off in the wrong direction. There's a lot of excitement at South County Fire by having the annexations, first Mill Creek, then Briar and Montlake Terrace, and now there's discussions potentially about having Edmonds join the fold. And Edmonds would also be good economically for South County Fire because they again have one of those underpriced contracts. So they're kind of on a high on that sort of thing, so to speak. Fire District 4, which is the fire district to the east of us that is around Snohomish, and then also Surfer, our buddies, the old District 7, have just sent a letter to the commissioners at South County Fire and said, we'd like to get into conversation with you about potential annexations, mergers, working together. We're all great guys. Let's work together. And everybody's kind of excited about South County Fire, except I was the downer last week and stood up and said, I don't think that's a great idea. And I exposed them to the concept that what I think we all explored here with what happens when you've got a fire district that's operating in a dense urban area called inside the urban growth area versus a non-dense fire district that was operating outside the urban growth area. For those of you who were here, or just to remind you, there was one slide in particular where we looked at the density of assessed value and the density of population over square miles, over however many square miles it is. And South County Fire was 5 times more dense in terms of assessed value per square mile and 5 times more dense in population per square mile. So if you're running a business where it all depends on how fast can you get there to save me from my heart attack or to save my house from burning down, you have to have stations and people and equipment positioned in a less dense area. So I brought up this concept of looking at the efficiencies of fire service inside and outside of the fire, inside and outside the urban growth boundary. And there was some stroking some chins and going, oh, that's kind of interesting. So they asked their data analysts to bring them a map that showed where the urban growth boundary was. I will be off the fire board at the end of this year. Not because of this, but I'm hoping I've kind of got them to think about it a little bit. But I encourage us all, our citizens, our electeds, and our staff to encourage that we would love to have opportunities for South County Fire and all the agencies to work well together. South County Fire is an excellent agency. We've seen that. They did a great job of keeping taxes low. That's not always the case with some of our partners to the east, just being frank. And so I think it's important that we keep the pressure on to make sure that what we bought into is what we continue to get. You do have some new elected officials as of January 1 on the fire board. Our district, one of the districts that covers Mill Creek, Micah Rowland, had been appointed. He was elected to that position. The second position was an at-large position. Derek Daniels, who had been the chair, lost his his election for the at-large position to Ed Wittes. And Ed Wittes happens to live in Mill Creek, happens to be an ex-fire chief from old Fire District 1. And so I think we will be hopeful that he comes on board and does some good work. I'd encourage all of you as electeds to reach out to all those elected officials, all 5 of them all 7 of them, all 5 districted people plus the 2 at-large represent our citizens in Mill Creek. And so it's important that I think it's important we reach out and keep contact with them and make sure they keep providing the excellent service at the good value that our citizens voted for. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? Okay. Irmina?
Good evening, Council. In your packets tonight is the October 2023 financial report. On stamp page 62, this represents the general fund in summary. And just of note, the year-to-date actuals is compared with the adopted budget, because as of October, you have not adopted the mid-biennium adjustments. So there's a little bit of difference in, if you recall, with the adjustments that you've made. So our benchmark as of October is about 42% of our biennium, and both our general fund revenues and expenditures are lagging behind that that benchmark, although our revenues are higher than our expenditures. Our property taxes are of course behind. We know that, we've anticipated that, because the property tax, next property tax distribution has not come until this month. Our sales taxes, that analysis is on stamp page 187. And in here, our year-to-date is from January to October compared to 2022 is 140,000 higher, and that's about 4%, which is reflective of inflation. The CPI right now in the Seattle area is about 4.8%, again, trending higher than the national average of 3.2%. Month-over-month comparison of our sales tax shows that if we compare month of October of 2022, we are down by 26,000 or 7.23%, and that's reflective of the CPI. Recall that in right around October of 2022, our CPI is between 8 to 9%, and now we are about less than 5%. And then, of course, our miscellaneous revenues are now tracking at 424,000 in general fund. That's 122% more than what we originally adopted. And that's reflective of our LGIP investment rates. As of October, that is at 5.4%. And compared to last year, it was at 3.0%. Also, this is reflective of the federal funds rate. The federal funds rate is still at 5.25% to 5.5%. And although that is high and giving us good investment returns, it is hurting us on the REIT side, and I'll discuss that in a minute. On the expenditure side, we have about 10 months worth of personnel cost here, about 5.6 million, and contracts of 2.7 million. On stamp page 184, this graph represents our legal expenditures or legal bills through September of 2023. And so the leadership team has continued to manage our legal expenses. So if we compare 2023 and 2022, October, say for same month of October, the current year is $50,000 less. And if we compare it 2 years ago, it's about $269,000 less. Although we are slightly below right now, month over month, year to date, year to year, we are anticipating that we'll come close or slightly be over the 970,000 that we spent in 2022 because of the ongoing labor negotiations right now. And so going back to REIT, our REIT right now, year to date, we've received only 26% of the biannual budget. And again, that's reflective of the federal funds rate being at 5.5%. But also take note that our home prices, although now it's only 1.4% less than, the prices are less than a year ago. earlier this year, all the way up to August, the prices were at 8.8% lower than what it was a year ago. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing a nod of head negatives. Thank you for the report. Any other staff reports?
No other reports, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, I think the only thing I had to report on was the night after our last meeting, we had a city chat at Coger. Interesting in that last year, we heard a lot about speeding. This year, we heard nothing about speeding and a lot about concerns with the water and concerns with the pathways near the Coger facility. So, but it was well attended again, but we do have a bit of a captive audience at that venue, but we will be back again a year from now. Mayor Pro Tem, any reports?
Thank you, Mayor. Only that I just want to add on with you that it was interesting to hear the transformation with the different topics from last year and how concerned residents were regarding water and discussions on the sidewalks and their pathways being clear. So versus the conversations last year. So it was really fun to go and talk to everyone, and I look forward to seeing everyone hopefully at the parade for the Santa Parade and the tree lighting this weekend.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
No report, Mayor.
Councilmember Steckler.
Just a quick report. The Arts and Beautification Board recently met, and they are putting together some ideas for enhancements to the Veterans Memorial from a design standpoint, things to make it a little bit better. As you know, we ran out of room for any more names. They're looking at ways to solve that problem. But at this point, they're just coming up with some ideas that they're cultivating. So if people have any suggestions or ideas of their own that they would like to present, I would recommend that they run their ideas through Jody Hawkins, who is the city representative for the A&B board. I think that'd be the best person to get it on the agenda. But that's a new topic for the A&B board. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ellison.
No report.
Councilmember Paddock.
Two quick things. One, I love seeing that legal fee drop year over year. So thank you so much for calling that out. It just signifies the positive operations of the city management. I really appreciate that. Second thing, speaking of positive reinforcement, a shout out to the Bedrosian property, and in particular, the HOA president, Mr. Dills, who I think really succinctly called out he wasn't going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It wasn't exactly what they wanted, but they weren't going to hold out for what was going to be the absolute agreement for everyone. And that would be a great way for us to think about what we're going to do with the comp plan over the next 18 months. Thank you.
Okay, audience communication. Anyone in chambers? See a nod of heads. Anyone online? Okay, can we have a motion to extend the, I know that I'm extending the regular
Oh,
meeting.
Will raised his hand.
Motion to extend the regular meeting till 9:05.
Oh, move to extend the regular meeting to 9:05.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Will, it's your time. You don't have full 7 minutes, but I'll give you 3. Name and city of residence, please.
3 is fine. Will Nelson, Mill Creek, Washington, Red Cedar subdivision. First, I guess, congratulations to Vince Cavalieri for his winning the election and his continued presence on the council for another 4 years. And secondly, to quote the mayor, while I realize that the presentation on the Mill Creek Boulevard study was in fact a series of drawings and did not represent anything specific, it's been my experience over the last many years, probably since about 1975, that once something like that gets presented, it can be very hard to get the thought out of people's minds as to what is going to happen in the future. And to give you an example from 1975, the community I was living in wanted to build a new one-story hospital. and the developer and others came up with a two-story hospital. We ended up with a two-story hospital. Well, not asked for, that's what we ended up with. And secondly, on that similar subject, and the presentation by the comprehensive plan person, I was wondering if we weren't hearing too much dogma out of that person and in her presentation, and perhaps a little less dogma might be appropriate from them in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Anyone else? Seeing none, or we've completed our agenda, and we'll adjourn the meeting at 9 p.m. straight up. Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Right.